At 34, I'm still living at my childhood home with my mother. It's been 3 years since my father passed away, and I decided to stay here because I didn't want to leave her alone. During these years, we had unwelcome visitors, my brother Bob and his wife Jane. I've known Bob since his birth, and Jane, his middle school classmate, has been around almost as long. They've been a couple since then, and Bob would bring Jane home for vacations, so I got to know her quite well. To put it plainly, they've left a lasting impression on me, and not a good one. They used to bully me for fun. Our parents, both busy with their careers, were often away on weekends, and that's when Bob and Jane's torment would peak. We lived in a large mansion built by my father, a CEO. During those unsupervised times, Bob and Jane would trick me into playing hide and seek, only to trap me in a closet. They would cram it with stuff, making it impossible for me to get out. I'd be stuck there until just before our parents came home, and then I'd be punished for the mess in the closet. One day, my mother came home early and caught Bob and Jane in the act. She was furious, and after that, I was never locked in the closet again. However, the harassment didn't stop. I resented my parents for their absence and felt a deep-seated anger towards Bob and Jane. But as I grew older, my resentment also extended to my parents for not stepping in sooner. By middle school, their cruelty escalated. Bob and Jane shredded my school uniform, defaced nearly all my textbooks, and destroyed my cushions and bedding. Their relentless torment was a painful reminder of how little support I had received growing up. Later, I discovered that Bob and Jane, who were high school students at the time, had performed poorly on their final exams and had been scolded by their parents. It seemed that their anger and frustration had fueled their cruel revenge on me. I was left stunned in my devastated room, overwhelmed with questions. Why was I enduring this? Why was no one coming to my aid? I stood there, lost in these thoughts, until my mother came to call me for dinner. When she saw the state of my room, she screamed in horror. My father rushed in as well. Bob, the last to arrive, struggled to contain his laughter, occasionally letting out a chuckle. Confronted by my shocked parents, I cried out, "Mom, Dad, I want to leave this house." Tears streamed down my face as I continued, "No one is helping me. Bob and Jane are always so mean. My toys, my study materials, my clothes, they're all ruined. I don't want to live like this anymore. I hate both of you. You're not helping me." It was the first time I had cried so openly in front of my family. Until that moment, I had silently endured and wept quietly in my struggles. But now, I sobbed loudly like a child. Seeing my distress, my mother hugged me tightly, apologizing for everything that had happened. Even Bob, witnessing the severity of the situation, appeared to understand the gravity and tried to leave. But my father stopped him by grabbing him by the collar. "Do you realize what you've done? This is criminal," my father said, his voice low but filled with intensity. Bob protested, "Oh, come on, it's just an exaggeration. We were only playing around." "Destruction of property is a crime," my father retorted. "You understand you need to make amends, right?" "But Catherine is family," Bob argued weakly. Bob's attempt to downplay his actions with, "I'm a minor. Minors can't be criminals, right?" was met with a deep sigh from my father. "Yes, a minor like you might not be able to pay for the damage," my father said, "but it's up to the parents to address the consequences. If you can't make amends, we will have to. We also bear responsibility for raising you this way. I think it's time for you to go live with your uncle." My uncle, my father's younger brother, was a stern figure who had a reputation for disliking dishonesty. He was feared by the neighborhood kids, almost like a boogeyman. He was kind to well-behaved children, including me, but had no patience for troublemakers like Bob and Jane. Bob, of course, was terrified of the idea. "No way. I don't want to live with Uncle. I promise I won't do this again." My father's voice was resolute. "You've made that promise before. When you and Jane locked Catherine in the closet, chased her around, and threw bugs at her knowing she's afraid of them, each time you promised to change. But you never did." He continued, "We cannot keep someone who hurts our family, even if they are family. Never set foot in this house again." With that, my father grabbed Bob by the scruff of his neck and dragged him out. Later, I learned that my parents had been deeply upset by Bob's behavior. Despite their scolding, Bob still didn't seem to grasp why he was being punished. Bob continued his annoying antics against me, and I began to think he was beyond help. It seemed there were people in the world who couldn't grasp even the basic rules of society, and Bob and Jane were prime examples. Initially, Bob had planned to attend university on our father's dime after finishing high school. But my father told him that someone like Bob would likely end up causing trouble even in university. As a result, Bob ended up working at our uncle's company right after graduation. It became clear that Bob was desperate to escape our uncle's rigid environment. Shortly after high school, he and Jane, who had also just graduated, rented an apartment together. They began their new life with the understanding that neither their parents nor their uncle would help with rent or living expenses. Soon after moving out, Bob asked me to lend him some money. At the time, I had just started high school and wasn't working part-time. The money I had saved up, which Bob had previously stolen when he lived at home, had been fully reimbursed by my parents as I had documented everything meticulously in a notebook. Although I had the money, I had no intention of giving it to him. I told Bob, "Aren't you ashamed to ask your high school-aged sister for money? I'm not even working, so I don't have any extra funds. There's no way I'm giving you any." After that, I informed both my mother and father about Bob's request for money. They were furious and vowed not to provide any further assistance. I felt it was best for Bob and Jane to fend for themselves without relying on others. Since then, I focused on my studies and worked hard to go to college. I dedicated myself to my studies throughout college and, after graduation, joined a company where I continued to grow and learn. My busy life made me completely forget about Bob. That is, until an invitation to his wedding arrived at our house. I saw that Jane, with whom Bob had been living, was the bride. I thought, so they're finally getting married. My parents and I discussed whether we should attend the wedding of a family member. However, just a few days before the wedding, my father collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. He had always been fragile, but this was the first time he had collapsed so severely. Both my mother and I were frantic and immediately called for an ambulance. In the midst of the chaos, I reached out to Bob, only to be met with a dismissive response. "I'm about to get married. Don't call me during this crucial period of my bachelorhood," he said. When I informed him of our father's emergency hospitalization, he shrugged it off, saying, "He just tripped, didn't he? Make sure to come to my wedding." And with that, he hung up. Shortly after, our father passed away. With both the wake and funeral inevitable, my mother and I had to inform Bob that we wouldn't be able to attend his wedding. Despite his insistence that we come, we decided to stay home. We also informed Jane's parents about our father's passing and our inability to attend the wedding. While Jane's parents understood our situation, Bob and Jane criticized us for not coming, calling our absence disrespectful. The messages left on my mother's and my voicemail were so absurd that it made me question who the real rude ones were. Bob and Jane accused us of being disrespectful, claiming that we were trying to ruin their wedding, despite all the effort we had put into it. While my mother and I were occupied with arranging the funeral, Bob and Jane proceeded with their wedding as if our father's death was an afterthought. After that, my mother and I chose not to discuss the situation further, but it was clear that our relationship with my brother had been irrevocably damaged. Then, unexpectedly, Bob showed up at our doorstep. When I answered the intercom and heard, "I've got a delivery," I was taken aback to see Bob and Jane standing there. The monitor had only shown their silhouettes, so I was unprepared for their arrival. As soon as I opened the door, they barged in with large pieces of luggage, pushing me aside. Hey, what's the rush?" I protested. It seemed Bob had completely ignored our father's final command to never set foot in our house again. Bob and Jane rudely entered, dumped their luggage in the hallway, and began speaking to me without any regard for decency. "You and Mom need to leave this house immediately," Bob declared. "What?" I responded, shocked. "Isn't Mom diagnosed with dementia? This mansion isn't suited for someone like her or a loser like you who never improves." Bob continued. "A place like this should belong to glamorous people like Jane and me. So you need to get out right away." I was stunned. What on earth was my brother talking about? After 3 years since our father's death, he hadn't offered an apology, visited the grave, or made any effort to mend things. And now he was demanding the mansion. To make matters worse, he presumed her mother had dementia and was planning to evict her. I was left speechless. Just then, our mother emerged from a room at the back. "Catherine, what's going on?" she asked, her confusion evident. When she saw my brother and Jane, she said something that left me even more bewildered. "Oh, who might you be? If you're a stranger, please leave," she said. Bob and Jane burst into mocking laughter. "See," Bob said, "this is how she acts every time we call her. Her dementia must be getting worse." I'll leave it to you to take care of Mom, Bob said dismissively. You can have her. I'll take the mansion. After all, I'm the eldest son, so it's only right that I get the mansion. With that, Bob strode deeper into the house. Jane, mimicking Bob's demeanor, turned to me and our mother, saying, "Take the old lady and get out. I never want to see you again." I rushed to my mother's side, asking, "Mom, are you okay?" Feeling as though we were being forcibly evicted, my mother and I left the mansion, abandoning all the old furniture behind. We gathered our personal belongings and fled the house. Fortunately, a friend of mine, who was abroad and unable to manage his house, offered it to us. His cousin had been looking after it, but with his imminent transfer to another state next year, it seemed like perfect timing for us to use it. When we arrived at the house and set down our luggage, a sense of relief washed over us. We took a moment to breathe deeply and relax. Then my mother said with a hint of humor, "We've left that house, and I still can't stand how Bob and Jane acted. Maybe we should just sell it." I took the opportunity to ask the question that had been on my mind. "Bob said you have dementia, Mom. What's that about?" "Oh, that," she said, her tone reflective. "About 2 years ago, Bob and Jane began frequently asking me for money. They didn't attend their father's funeral or contact me afterward. I was baffled by their nerve to ask for money after treating me so poorly. So every time they called, I pretended not to recognize them and said, 'Who? I don't know you. You're a stranger to me, right?' It seemed Bob and Jane misunderstood my mother's indifference. They interpreted her treatment of them as forgetting who they were, assuming she genuinely had dementia because she no longer wanted anything to do with them. Regardless, I felt it was wrong to evict someone you believe has dementia. My mother quickly decided to move forward with selling the mansion. We had discussed selling the large mansion ever since our father passed away, and we were left living there alone. At that time, one of the executives from my father's company, where I am currently undergoing training as a successor, had expressed interest in buying the mansion if we decided to sell. So the buyer was essentially confirmed. We just needed to handle the formalities. When I spoke with a real estate acquaintance and explained the situation to the executive, they agreed that if we left Bob and Jane alone, the house could fall into serious disrepair. Something needed to be done quickly. A week later, my smartphone rang incessantly, and my mother's phone was also blowing up. There were numerous calls from Bob to my mother's phone and from Jane to mine. They probably wanted to discuss the same issue, but we found their attempts amusing and chose to ignore them for a while. We enjoyed our tea and chatted, letting an hour pass without noticing. It seemed Bob and Jane had been trying to reach us the entire time. When I finally answered the call, Jane exclaimed, "Finally, why didn't you pick up sooner? There's a huge problem. The house has been taken over." "Wait a minute," I said. "Didn't you two take over the house? I think we're the ones who should be saying we've been taken over." "No," Jane said, sounding panicked. "Bob and I took over the mansion, but now strangers have come and are demanding we leave. They've barged in and are trying to kick us out. Our mansion has been taken over." I couldn't help but burst out laughing. I was tempted to tell her that they were the ones who had unlawfully occupied the house in the first place. Chuckling, I replied, "You're talking about being taken over, but you're not even the legal owners. My mother, the rightful owner, sold the house to someone else. So the strangers you're talking about are the new owners, and you need to move out." "What?" "She sold it. But this mansion belongs to Bob." Jane was in shock. "When did anyone say that?" "Well, no one explicitly said it," I answered, "but Bob is the eldest son. Isn't it assumed that this house, along with the property and the company, would eventually be his? And that Jane would live elegantly as the CEO's wife in this mansion?" Despite everything, Jane was frantic and struggled to grasp the situation. I burst out laughing again. The fact that Jane thought Bob would automatically inherit the mansion and become the CEO of the company just because he was the eldest son was astonishing. Such naive thinking. Given Jane's firm belief, Bob likely shared the same misguided expectations about inheriting both the mansion and the company, despite no one ever promising him either. I laughed again at her absurd assumptions. "Bob as a CEO? You as the CEO's wife? How could you even entertain such fantasies? You're both still low-level employees at the company where you first started without any plans or education to succeed in the business." Jane was clearly taken aback by my words. Stunned, she retorted, "In that case, I'll just inherit the company from Uncle." I laughed even harder. You should at least check the company's personnel announcements. My uncle's cousin's son became the president last month. What? Jane was in disbelief. So there's no chance for Bob to become CEO, and I can't be the CEO's wife. That's correct, I confirmed. Can I hang up now? I don't think I need to talk to strangers anymore. Wait, please, Catherine, give us some money, Jane pleaded. Well, goodbye then, I said, ending the call. Later, I heard from my uncle about what happened next. Bob and Jane refused to leave the mansion, clinging to the pillars and stubbornly refusing to go. My uncle had to come and pick them up himself. It seems their strict training at my uncle's company had scared them so much that they cried when he took them away. They were placed at a mountain retreat owned by one of my uncle's acquaintances because they proved too unpredictable to be left on their own. My uncle warned them that if they didn't improve at the retreat, they might never leave the mountain. Despite this warning, they attempted to escape multiple times but were caught each time. As for me, the person handling the house management is my fiancé, who is currently working abroad. I'm living in his parents' house while he completes his long-term assignment. He plans to end his assignment this year and will soon be planning our wedding. My mother and uncle, who have helped us so much, will be invited to the wedding, but of course, Bob and Jane will not.
My name is Stella. I grew up in what seemed like a fairy tale world. I was the cherished daughter in a family with wealth that rivaled nations. Despite our affluence, my parents, bless their hearts, ensured I understood the value of hard work and frugality. Money talks, but wisdom listens, my father often reminded me. While my mother insisted, I learned financial prudence from a young age. Life was enchanting until tragedy struck when I was 12. My parents perished in a private jet crash, and my storybook life was abruptly overshadowed by loss. After their death, I moved in with my grandmother. We lived in a humble abode, a stark contrast to the opulence I had known. This new life taught me that true luxury came from love and care, not material wealth. My inheritance was secured until I turned 28, leaving me to navigate life under my grandmother's wise guidance. The college provided both an escape and a grounding force, leading me to cross paths with Boston, a bright scholarship student with a heart of gold and a sharp wit. Our connection was unexpected and profound. Introducing Boston to my grandmother was daunting. I had kept my financial background a secret, heeding my grandmother's advice to let him know me for who I truly am, not my wealth. Grandma, this is Boston, I introduced them, feeling a knot in my stomach. Boston extended his hand politely. Nice to meet you, ma'am, he greeted her. My grandmother welcomed him warmly and immediately put us at ease with her stories and laughter. As Boston blended seamlessly into our simpler life, helping my grandmother with dishes and sharing stories, I saw in his actions the makings of a deep and genuine bond. Later, as we walked outside, Boston shared his appreciation for my grandmother and his deeper understanding of my life. His sincerity assured me of his genuine affection, beyond the superficialities of wealth. There's more to me than meets the eye, I guess, I acknowledged, moved by his understanding. He responded with a reassuring hug, promising his presence for all the layers of my life, not just the financial ones. In that embrace, I knew I had found someone I could truly trust. I was keenly aware of the secret I carried, a delicate truth balanced on the edge of revelation. As Boston and I drove to his parents' house in silence, I sensed his tension through the tight grip he had on the steering wheel. You sure you're ready for this? I ventured, trying to lighten the mood. Yeah, just my mom can be a bit much. Don't take anything she says to heart, Boston replied, his smile strained and unconvincing. As we approached the grand, imposing structure that was Boston's childhood home, anxiety knotted in my stomach. There was no turning back now. The moment we entered, Boston's mother, Chaya, greeted us with a piercing gaze that felt almost invasive. So, this is the girl you've been hiding, she remarked coldly as we stood on the marble floors that echoed her frostiness. Boston started to introduce me, but Chaya cut him off with a dismissive wave. I know who she is. Come, let's sit. I've prepared some tea. Her tone left no room for argument, and we followed her into a living room that resembled more of a showroom. As she served the tea, Chaya didn't waste a moment before she began her probing. I hear you were raised by your grandmother. Must have been quite the humble upbringing, she said, the word humble dripping with condescension. I clenched my teeth, maintaining my composure. Yes, my grandma taught me a lot, important lessons about life, not just trivialities, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Chaya smirked.
I see.
And your parents gone too soon, I heard. Tragic. How does one cope without proper guidance? Boston interjected, visibly uncomfortable. Mom, that's enough. Let's not. No, it's okay, Boston. I cut in, feeling a wave of defiance rise within me. Yes, my parents are gone, and yes, it was tough. But I got through it. It's made me who I am. Chaya sipped her tea, her scrutiny unrelenting. Interesting. And what about your future, dear? Any plans? Or are you just riding along on my son's coattails? That comment stung, but I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the reason I was there. I've got plans, big ones. And I don't need to ride on anyone's coattails to achieve them, I stated firmly. The room was thick with tension, but Boston, bless him, tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. Mom, let's not do this, okay? We're here to enjoy each other's company. Chaya set her teacup down with deliberate precision. I'm merely trying to understand the woman my son has chosen. You can't fault a mother for caring about her child's future. The back and forth felt like an endless tug-of-war, a verbal duel with no victors. Just when I thought I couldn't bear it anymore, Boston's sister, Mina, entered. Her curious eyes carried a judgmental edge that mirrored her mother's. So, you're the famous girlfriend. Heard a lot about you, not all good, Mina remarked with a tone laden with disdain. I was on the verge of snapping back when Boston stood up. That's enough, both of you. We came here in good faith to share a part of our lives with you. If that's not something you can respect, then maybe we should leave. The remainder of our visit was awkward at best. Conversations were stilted, laughter forced, but Boston's hand held mine under the table, a silent vow that we were in this together. As we departed, a mix of relief and frustration washed over me. I'm sorry about that, Boston apologized as we got back into the car. They can be a bit intense. I sighed, watching the lights of the house disappear in the rearview mirror. It's not your fault. But man, your mom and sister, there's something else. Boston chuckled, a melancholic sound reflecting the weight of the evening. Despite everything, we managed to get through it. We survived, right? Survived and stronger, I said, leaning my head against the car window. The stars twinkled above us, clear and bright, almost like a sign of hope. No matter the challenges, it seemed there was always a path forward. The next family gathering, however, delivered a sharp jolt back to reality. Chaya, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, didn't hesitate to assert her influence. If you two are serious about getting married, we're getting a prenup signed, she declared, her gaze piercing through me as if challenging me to protest. I maintained my composure, shrugged, and calmly responded, fine by me. I'm not after your son's money. Boston seemed to shrink beside me, his discomfort palpable. Once we were alone, he was quick to apologize, his promises laced with desperation. My mom won't get in our way, I promise. We'll be happy, he assured me, his eyes begging me to trust him. The wedding planning proceeded without much issue, but the actual day of the wedding unleashed a storm. Mina, my sister-in-law-to-be, dramatically overstepped during the reception. Inebriated and unrestrained, she seized the moment to create a spectacle. With a glass in hand, she staggered forward and blurted out, "This one's a gold digger. Doesn't know the first thing about our kind of life. Trying to snag my brother's cash." Her tirade spiraled into more disruptive behavior, causing a scene that crossed lines of decency. My cheeks burning with anger and embarrassment, I pulled out my phone and dialed the police. This chaos needed to be addressed, and I wouldn't let Mina's outburst go unchecked. The fallout was tumultuous. Accusations flew, and threats were made. Chaya vowed revenge for the disgrace I had allegedly brought upon their family. "You've made a mockery of us. The press will have a field day with my daughter's antics. Thanks to you," she fumed. Boston was caught in the middle, torn between his familial obligations and his commitment to our relationship. I could see the toll it was taking on him, the strain evident in his weary eyes and slumped shoulders. Despite the drama, I stood firm. This was no longer just about me. It was about setting boundaries and insisting on respect, regardless of financial status or familial ties. As the commotion settled and the night quieted down Boston, and I found ourselves amidst the wreckage of what should have been our happiest day. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice laden with sorrow. "I never wanted any of this." I took his hand, feeling the stark reality of our situation. "We'll get through this, but things need to change." Starting with setting boundaries with your family, that night, our vows took on a new depth, not just to stay together, but to fight for the respect we deserved and to not let old money or lingering grudges define our future. 3 years have passed since that tumultuous wedding day, and the weight of our vows has only grown heavier. Chaya's presence in our lives has diminished, and while her absence isn't mourned, it's Boston's gradual withdrawal that has driven a wedge between us. His late returns home, the half-hearted excuses about work, it all started to add up. The warmth that once defined our relationship cooled into mere politeness, and eventually, even that began to fade. The tipping point came one night, marking a decisive moment in our marriage. When he flung his jacket onto the chair as if it had wronged him, and uttered words that stung like venom. "You know, I could have married someone with a bit more class, more fitting for my circle." I was left stunned and speechless. The pain of his words felt like a physical blow, but I restrained myself, recalling my grandmother's advice to remain patient and really see Boston for who he was. So, I swallowed the pain and the rising tears, hiding the wealth that was rightfully mine, choosing instead to ponder a possible solution. One evening, filled with a mix of hope and desperation, I suggested, "Boston, don't you think it's time we thought about having a baby? It might bring us closer together." His reaction was dismissive and chilling. "A baby now? Don't be ridiculous. We're not ready for that, not by a long shot." His outright refusal and the disdain in his voice crushed any hope I had that a child might repair the widening rift between us. As days turned into silent weeks, and those weeks stretched into months, every rude remark and each late night he came home added another layer to the walls separating us. I found solace in conversations with my grandmother, pouring my heart out over tea that cooled long before our talks ended. "He's not the man I married, Grandma. I don't know if he ever was," I confessed. She listened with sad, understanding eyes. "You can't make someone be who you want them to be, darling. Sometimes we see what we want to see until we can't ignore the truth any longer." Her words, though painful, offered a sliver of relief. I wasn't insane for wanting a partner who viewed me as an equal and treated me with respect. But as time passed, it became increasingly clear that Boston had changed, or perhaps had never been the man I thought he was. The thought of leaving crossed my mind more often than I cared to admit, yet each time I dismissed it, clinging to a fading hope that the man I loved would return to me. In an attempt to rekindle the spark in our relationship, I threw a lavish birthday party for Boston, sparing no expense and excluding Chaya and Mina, whose drama I could do without. Boston seemed elated, basking in the adoration and well wishes from our closest friends. For a brief moment, it felt like we were back in the honeymoon phase, all laughter and inside jokes. But the illusion shattered when Chaya and Mina unexpectedly showed up. Unbeknownst to me, Boston had invited them, hoping to avoid any family conflict. Their arrival immediately tensed the atmosphere. Mina, ever the provocateur, made a direct line for the bar, dressed ostentatiously to attract attention. Chaya's snide comments flew under the radar, each a veiled insult towards me or our marriage. As the evening progressed, Mina's behavior escalated, fueled by champagne and a desperate need to be the center of attention. She launched into a tirade about how I didn't fit into their family and was unworthy of their name. The evening devolved into chaos, a stark reminder of the deep-seated issues that no party could mask. As Boston mingled and played the dutiful son, oblivious to the chaos unfolding around him, The evening spiraled further out of control when an inebriated Mina decided to make a scene. Brandishing some documents while hurling insults with each slurred word, her antics culminated dramatically with her tumbling into the pool, scattering papers everywhere. Rushing over out of curiosity rather than concern, I began gathering the soaked documents, my heart sinking as I pieced together their contents. Divorce papers, signed by Boston. Each signature felt like a betrayal, the reality hitting me hard. The party blurred into insignificance as I clutched the documents, Boston's signature glaring up at me, an undeniable confirmation of the heartbreaking truth. This was not just a memorable party, it was the end of everything I thought we shared. Reeling from the discovery, I approached Boston with the damp divorce papers in hand, demanding an explanation. "Boston, what's this about?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Before he could answer, his mother, with a smug smile, interjected, "Oh dear, looks like your little scheme didn't work out, did it? Boston is leaving you. Thought you could trap him with a baby for his money." I searched Boston's face for any trace of the man I had married, but he couldn't meet my gaze. His silence was more telling than any words could be. With a heavy heart, I signed the divorce papers, which now seemed merely a formality to end a chapter one no longer wished to be part of. As the dust settled, my grandmother approached, her presence always calming. She didn't need to say anything. Her eyes conveyed empathy, understanding, and an unspoken support that strengthened my resolve. It was then that she chose to reveal the truth to everyone present. "She doesn't need any of your money," Grandma declared firmly. "In a month, she turns 28 and will inherit a fortune far beyond what you could imagine. She's been raised to value people over wealth, to seek genuine connections rather than financial gain." The room fell silent, the impact of her words palpable. Chaya's expression shifted from smugness to shock and then to desperate greed as she scrambled to apologize, her insincerity clear. Boston, too, suddenly seemed keen to revise the story, insisting his intentions were never to hurt me, influenced as he was by his mother. But it was too late. The veil had been lifted, revealing the stark realities of our relationship and the true motivations behind it. I met their apologies with a serene smile, not out of forgiveness, but from an inner peace that stemmed from knowing my worth, independent of the impending wealth. "You've shown me your true colors," I said, my voice filled with a newfound strength. "As for surprises, well, I've prepared another one for you." At that moment, a loud honk pierced the tense air outside. A sleek luxury car rolled up to the gate, the one I had secretly purchased for Boston as a surprise. The irony of the situation was not lost on me, underscoring the stark contrast between the tangible gifts I prepared and the intangible deceit he offered. I couldn't suppress a bitter laugh as I excused myself and stepped outside, ready to confront the final act of this unfolding drama. There it was, a luxury car that epitomized the affection I thought we shared, now reduced to a mere emblem of pretense and betrayal. Without hesitation, I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool and firm beneath me, mirroring the resolve that had solidified within me. Grandma, ever my pillar of strength, joined me. Her presence was a silent testament to the dignity and resilience that ran deep in our family's veins. Turning to face the house, I saw Boston and his mother at the doorway, their expressions a mixture of confusion and awe. "Everything from now on goes through my lawyer," I called out to them, my voice clear and stripped of any warmth it once carried. "And don't worry about my stuff, I'll have a courier pick it up." Their once smug and self-assured faces now displayed a dawning realization of their loss, not just of the material wealth they had coveted, but of the person they had grossly underestimated. With that, I turned the key, the car's engine purring to life, a sound that heralded freedom and new beginnings. Grandma and I exchanged a glance, a silent agreement that this was the first step toward a future unmarred by deceit and manipulation. As we drove away, the revelations and dramatic exits seemed to clear the air, as if the truth had not only unveiled the underlying greed and deceit, but also purified our path ahead. It wasn't long before the first test of my newfound resolve came calling, or rather ringing. The phone's shrill tone cut through the newfound peace. On the other end was Mina, her voice dripping with a sweetness that was unfamiliar and unsettling. Hey, I just wanted to, clear the air between us. We're practically the same age, right? We could be friends. I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. The contrast between her sugary tone and her usual disdain was stark. Friends? I echoed, the word feeling alien and ironic. You mean, like how friends don't badmouth each other at parties or try to humiliate them in front of everyone? There was a pause, a moment where I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she scrambled for a response. Well, water under the bridge and all that, she attempted feebly. Water into the pool, you mean? I shot back, unable to resist the jab. The ensuing silence was telling. It was clear that my refusal to play along had thwarted her plans. Fine, be that way, she snapped, her veneer of niceness crumbling away. You'll regret this. I hung up, feeling a mix of amusement and sadness. It was a stark reminder of the facades people wear and the lengths they will go to when faced with the consequences of their actions. The temptation to retaliate lingered, a nagging thought in the back of my mind. On a whim, I posted a video on social media of her falling into the pool. It went viral like wildfire. Within an hour, 1,000 people had liked it. My sister-in-law had become internet famous. She tried to call me, demanding I take it down, but I simply blocked her. I was done with her fake sweetness and her nasty attitude. A week later, my phone rang with a number I recognized all too well. It was Chaya, her voice unnaturally sweet, offering an olive branch she hoped I'd grasp. Let's put the past behind us, for Boston's sake. Can't we reconcile? She suggested, as if the wounds were mere scratches that could heal with a band-aid of words. No, Chaya, that ship has sailed, I replied, firm but not unkind. There was no vacillation in my voice, no anchor to pull me back into their turbulent waters. Resolved and steadfast, I wished Boston well, but our paths were now irrevocably parting ways. I was determined to look forward, not back. Nevertheless, Boston made his attempts at reconciliation. One morning, I discovered a bouquet of flowers on my doorstep, the card attached bearing a simple plea, I'm sorry. Please come back. Rather than warming my heart, the sight sparked anger, and without a second thought, I tossed them into the trash. His efforts didn't cease there. Boston tried visiting, showing up unannounced with hopes of talking things through. However, I was no longer the person he had left behind. His presence, once a source of comfort, now felt like an unwelcome intrusion. One evening, during another uninvited visit, I met him at the door with a resolve as firm as steel. If you don't stop this, I'm going to the police, I warned, my voice steady and unwavering. Your apologies can't undo what's been done. It's over, Boston. Really over. The gravity of my words seemed to finally reach him. His shoulders slumped, and with one final, lingering look, he turned and walked away. That was the last I saw of him. In the time that followed, I immersed myself in charity work, which became my new passion and purpose. Helping those in true need and connecting with people who valued kindness over wealth brought me a joy I hadn't realized was missing. Living with Grandma, I found peace in our quiet routine. We would sit and plan our next project, our next way to make a difference. It was during these moments I realized this was exactly where I was meant to be. I harbored no illusions about the road ahead. It would be fraught with challenges, perhaps even heartaches. But I also knew it would be filled with joy, moments of unbridled happiness, and the kind of love that enriches the soul. And so I lived my life looking forward, not backward. I worked, I helped, and I hoped. I believed in a future where I would find true love, not defined by wealth or status, but by genuine connection. And yes, one day, I envisioned having those 3 beautiful children I dreamed of. But for now, I was content. I was building a life of purpose, surrounded by a love that asked for nothing in return. This wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of a whole new book, and I was the one writing it. My name is Eva. Not long ago, I was a recent college graduate, filled with hope and dreams for the future, when an unexpected phone call shattered my world. It was the devastating news of my parents' sudden death in a car accident. They were my support system and my mentors in life, and their loss left me reeling, like a ship lost at sea, without its compass. My father was a man of jovial laughter and profound wisdom, always there to offer advice or a comforting embrace. Our conversations, ranging from philosophical debates to casual discussions about sports, were treasured moments of connection. He was not just my father. He was my stronghold against life's storms. My mother was the embodiment of kindness and support. She was there during the tense scenes of horror movies, stayed up late helping me with my school projects, and always had a soothing word and a warm embrace ready. Her constant love was the calm in the chaos of life. Their absence created an overwhelming void in my life, turning our home into a silent space filled with memories that echoed their absence. During this dark time, a man named Diego entered my life. He worked for a trading company and was at the accident scene. Moved by what he witnessed, he reached out to offer his support. His words were simple, but they anchored me during my storm of grief. Diego helped me handle the aftermath of the accident, the legal matters, the insurance, the never-ending paperwork. His presence became indispensable, his kindness a balm for my grief. As time passed, our relationship deepened. One day, with a look of earnestness, Diego proposed to me. Despite the whirlwind of emotions, I saw his genuine care and support through my hardest times, and I agreed to start a new chapter with him. Our wedding was a joyous celebration, a day filled with laughter and hope. Afterward, we moved into Diego's expansive house, a grand but cold mansion that stood as a testament to his success. Although impressive, the marble halls sometimes made me uneasy. Shortly after settling in, I discovered I was pregnant. The news brought a new wave of joy and hope. I imagined our future child and the life we would build together, a continuation of love through generations. Diego shared in the joy, but as we prepared for this new addition to our family, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and a lingering unease about the shadows cast by the grand corridors of our new home. After our son Bryson was born on a crisp winter morning, life seemed filled with new joys. Bryson, a beautiful baby with Diego's dark hair and my bright blue eyes, brought a profound love into my life, a feeling so intense it often left me breathless. Diego appeared equally enchanted by our son. Yet, as time passed, a change in him became apparent. One evening, Diego returned home late from work, his face set in a firm expression that hinted at underlying tensions. "Eva, we need to talk about our expenses," he said, his voice missing its usual warmth. Surprised, I inquired what he meant. He responded by dropping a stack of bills on the table, his tone becoming chilling. "Since Bryson arrived, our costs have risen significantly. We're spending far more than before," he stated. I felt a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. "But Diego, we have a baby now." "Babies need things," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. His gaze was sharp and unyielding. "That's not the point, Sila. You're buying things we don't need," he countered. His words stung, and I felt a surge of hurt and anger. I had always viewed Diego as my partner, but his remarks painted me as a burden, an unwanted expense. The following days were strained with tension. Diego scrutinized every purchase, accusing me of overspending, no matter how I tried to economize. "Eva, you need to understand the value of money," he would say condescendingly. "We need food, and Bryson needs diapers. We can't just stop buying essentials," I would argue, but his responses were always icy. "Then make do with less," he'd retort. I began to strategize every grocery trip, opting for the cheapest items, choosing store brands, and picking slightly bruised produce to save money. I walked to the store and back to avoid public transport costs, following Diego's strict rules even on clothing. "No new clothes," he would insist, firm and uncompromising. As I looked at my fading wardrobe, the frayed dresses and the worn shirts, a wave of sadness washed over me. I wasn't seeking luxury, just the basics that hadn't been worn threadbare. One day, I spotted a lovely little jumper for Bryson in a shop window. It was on sale, but still beyond what I could justify spending. With a heavy heart, I walked away, the image of the jumper lingering in my mind, a symbol of the constrained life Diego's priorities had imposed on us. When I returned home, Diego was already there, looking accusatory. "You were at the store, weren't you? Buying more unnecessary stuff," he charged. "I didn't buy anything, Diego," I responded, my voice calm but firm. "You've made it impossible for me to do so." He scoffed dismissively. "Don't play the victim, Eva. You're the one who can't manage her spending." My heart raced as I confronted him. "I'm trying to take care of our son, Diego. Can't you see that?" Diego stood up, his face flushed with anger. "I am the one providing for this family, Eva. You're just squandering my money." Anger surged through me. "Your money? Diego, we are a family. It's supposed to be our money." He laughed coldly, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, Eva, you're so naive." I stood my ground, hands clenched. "No, Diego. I'm not naive. I'm trying to do what's best for our son." His glare intensified. "I'm trying to prevent us from going bankrupt, something you wouldn't understand." With that, he stormed out, leaving me standing alone, heart aching. Despite his accusations, Diego's lifestyle hadn't changed. He continued to wear designer suits and splurge on the latest gadgets, a new phone, a laptop, a watch, while I struggled to mend old clothes and stretch our meals. "Diego," I would start, my voice straining to stay neutral, "why is it that you can buy new things, but I can't?" He would smirk smugly. "Because I earn the money, Eva. I get to decide how it's spent." His words felt like a slap. I was his wife, the mother of his child, yet he treated me like a mere burden, an unwanted expense. His priorities were clear. His gadgets mattered more to him than his own family. It was a grim Tuesday when Bryson fell ill, his little body burning with fever, his cries filled with pain. I searched the cupboards, my heart sinking at the sight of them empty. With no options left, I took the last of our cash, the money I had set aside for Diego's favorite steak, and bought medicine for Bryson. I knew Diego would be furious, but Bryson's well-being was paramount. He was my son, my baby, and I couldn't bear to see him suffer. That evening, Diego came home tired and irritable, expecting a lavish meal. When he saw the empty table, his face reddened with anger. "Eva," he said, his voice dangerously low, "where's my dinner?" I swallowed hard. Bryson was sick. I used the money to buy him medicine. His eyes narrowed. "You what?" he bellowed. I repeated firmly. "I bought medicine for Bryson, despite the fear gripping my heart." Diego slammed his fist on the table. "You spent my money on medicine for that brat?" His words made me flinch. "Bryson is our son, Diego. He was sick," he scoffed. "He's always sick, always needing something just like you." My anger rose. "We're family, Diego. We're not freeloaders." Diego stood, his face twisted with fury. "You're nothing but a burden, Eva. You and that kid, all you do is take." I stood firm. "We're your responsibility, Diego. You can't just abandon us." He laughed cruelly. "Watch me." He grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the door. "Get out," he commanded coldly. "Take your brat and get out." I stared at him, heart pounding. "Diego, please. He's sick." As Diego's icy gaze bore into me, he coldly declared, "Not my problem." With a forceful shove, he pushed Bryson and me out the door, slamming it shut behind us. Mere minutes later, he tossed a bag of our clothes onto the sidewalk. There I stood, holding Bryson tightly in my arms, the chill of the night seeping into our bones. I stared at the house, our home, now a fortress from which we were exiled. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay with Diego any longer. I couldn't allow Bryson to endure his father's cruelty. We deserved better. We deserved a life free from Diego's anger and greed. With Bryson clutched in my arms, I walked away. Our future was uncertain, but my resolve was clear. I would fight for a better life for us. Diego might have pushed us away, but He couldn't break our spirit. We were stronger than he could ever realize. The city felt vast and overwhelming, a sprawling concrete jungle where we knew no one. Bryson, still a toddler, was too young to grasp the severity of our situation. We had no money, no friends, and no place to call home. It was like being adrift on a stormy sea. That's when I remembered Grandma, my father's mother. I had only met her once, but the memory of her house, a large old building in a quiet town far from the city's chaos, flickered in my mind. With the last of the cash found in an old jacket, I bought 2 intercity bus tickets. Bryson and I boarded the bus, our hearts heavy but determined. The journey was long, and Bryson, feeling unwell, whimpered in my arms. I held him close, whispering words of comfort and promising a brighter future. We arrived in Grandma's town as the sun was setting. The large, old house stood just as I remembered, a beacon of hope in our turmoil. Gathering my courage, I walked up to the door and knocked. The door creaked open, and there stood Grandma. She looked older than I remembered, her expression stern and her eyes sharp. "Yes?" she asked, her voice firm. I swallowed my fear and introduced myself. "Grandma, it's me, Eva, your son's daughter." She squinted, studying my face. After a moment, recognition dawned. "You have your father's eyes," she said, her tone softening. She opened the door wider, inviting us in. Inside, the warmth of the house contrasted starkly with the cold outside. I told Grandma everything about Diego, about Bryson's illness, about our eviction. I poured out the fears and burdens I had been carrying alone for too long. Grandma listened, her expression hardening as I spoke of Diego. "That scoundrel," she spat, her eyes flashing with anger. "He'll get what he deserves." At that moment, I felt a surge of relief. Here was someone who believed in me, someone who was on my side. Grandma offered us a place to stay, a place to call home. We were no longer alone. We had Grandma. That night, as Bryson slept soundly in a warm bed and I sat by the fire with Grandma, I felt a glimmer of hope. The journey to Grandma's had been fraught with uncertainty and fear, but it led us to a safe haven. It was our first step toward a new life, a life away from Diego's shadow. The attic, a dusty, forgotten place filled with boxes of old belongings, hadn't been visited in years. Yet, it held the promise of discovery and perhaps a fresh start, hidden among the memories stored in those boxes. The attic air was thick with the musty aroma of old paper and mothballs, and the floorboards groaned under my steps. "Be careful, Eva," Grandma called from below, her voice echoing slightly. "It's been ages since anyone's been up there." I nodded, my gaze sweeping over the cluttered space. As a trained restorer, I saw not a dusty attic, but a treasure trove of potential. Old furniture, paintings, and various knickknacks all begging to be brought back to life. With Grandma's blessing, I began to work on these forgotten pieces. I cleaned, repaired, and restored them, each item revealing its own story and history. It was a project of passion, a welcome distraction that helped me heal from recent hardships. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the attic transformed. The once discarded items emerged as beautiful antiques. Their value was greatly enhanced. Eager to see if these treasures could contribute to our new beginning, I took several pieces to a local antique shop. The shop owner, Mr. Jesse, was astounded by their quality. "These are fantastic, Eva," he exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with admiration. "Where did you find them?" "In my grandma's attic," I replied, a smile touching my lips. Mr. Jesse chuckled. "Well, she's lucky to have a granddaughter like you." I blushed at the compliment as he purchased the items for a sum that far exceeded my expectations. I returned home to Grandma, who was anxious to hear how I had fared. When I showed her the money, her eyes widened in astonishment. "Oh, my Eva," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I can't believe it." "It's all thanks to you, Grandma," I said, trying to contain my excitement. "These are your treasures after all." That night, we celebrated our small victory, a beacon of hope in our quest for a better life. The attic treasures had become more than just antiques. They symbolized that even in the darkest times, hope could be found. I continued restoring more items, each sale bringing us closer to financial stability. Meanwhile, Diego had not checked on us, not even a call to inquire about his son. He was likely too caught up in his new life to care about the family he left behind. But we wouldn't let him off easily. Grandma had a friend, Graham, a seasoned lawyer known for his no-nonsense approach. "We'll get that bastard," Graham had vowed, his eyes steely with determination. With Graham's help, we filed a claim for child support. Diego was livid when he learned of the legal action. He called me, his voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, Eva," he hissed. "You don't know what you're getting into." But fear no longer held me back. "Bring it on, Diego," I retorted confidently. "We'll see who regrets it in the end." The day of the court hearing arrived. Diego swaggered into the courtroom, confident and arrogant, his lawyer in tow. He smirked at me, his eyes cold and unfeeling, but I stood my ground, bolstered by the newfound strength and independence I had cultivated from restoring the attic's hidden treasures. I remained composed as the courtroom drama unfolded. Graham, our lawyer, stood confidently, presenting our case with unwavering resolve. He detailed how Diego had forsaken his responsibilities, neglecting to provide any financial support for Bryson. The judge listened attentively, his expression revealing nothing. When it was Diego's turn, his lawyer spun a narrative of victimization, portraying Diego as a man wronged by a spiteful ex-wife. But we were prepared. I had secretly recorded Diego on the night he evicted us, capturing his venomous tirade. As the recording played, the courtroom was enveloped in stunned silence, Diego's harsh words laying bare his true character. Diego's complexion paled as his facade of confidence disintegrated. The judge's frown deepened, his gaze stern. "This court will not tolerate such behavior," he declared. "Mr. Jackson, you are ordered to pay child support as per the law and, additionally, compensate for the emotional distress you've caused your ex-wife and son." Diego, visibly shaken, stared at me, disbelief etched across his face. I didn't revel in his shock. The mere recognition of his defeat was satisfying enough. Post-hearing, Diego attempted to insinuate himself back into our lives. His tone was sweet, feigning concern. "Eva," he cooed, "let's start over, for Bryson's sake." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Start over with you?" I responded firmly. "No, Diego. We're done." His surprise was palpable. "But Eva," he stuttered, "you need me. You can't survive without my support." He was wrong. I had secured a job as a restorer, working with a local antique store and a museum, earning a decent income. "I don't need you, Diego," I told him confidently. "I've got a good job and Bryson and I are doing just fine." After a pause, Diego's laughter, harsh and disbelieving, broke the silence. "You working? I don't believe it." "Well, you better start believing it," I countered, "because it's true. And guess what, Diego? I'm not just surviving. I'm thriving." Another pause followed, and then Diego hung up, his final words a venomous sneer. "You'll regret this, Eva. You'll see." But his words no longer frightened me. I had discovered my strength and independence, and there was no turning back. The ensuing months were bustling with activity. I was busy with work, with Bryson, with life. Yet through it all, I felt a profound happiness, the first in a long time. I was free from Diego's shadow, free from fear, and free from uncertainty. Grandma looked on with pride, her eyes twinkling. "You did good, kid," she said one day. "You stood up for yourself. You took control of your life." Her approval warmed my heart, reinforcing the new path I had courageously chosen. I smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride swell within me. "Thanks, Grandma," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you." And that was nothing but the truth. Grandma had been my steadfast support through it all, helping me rediscover my inner strength, and for that, I was immensely grateful. The sweet taste of victory was more than just winning in court. It was a deeply personal triumph. It affirmed my resilience and my ability to stand up for myself. This victory was a declaration that I was far more than just Diego's ex-wife. I was a survivor, a fighter, a devoted mother, and a skilled restorer. Each of these roles defined me, gave me purpose, and fueled my determination. As I watched Bryson play, his laughter ringing clear and his face alight with happiness, I knew beyond any doubt that I had made the right decision. Choosing to fight and stand up for our lives had not been easy, but it was worth every struggle. We had not just survived, we had thrived. Through this journey, I learned the power of my voice and the strength of my convictions. I was no longer just someone who had been pushed to the limits by life circumstances. I was a person who had pushed back and carved out a better path for myself and my son. As Bryson's joyous laughter filled the room, I was reminded that this fight was not just for me. It was for his future too, and we had won. Hello, I'm Alessia. My journey began when I was a young hairdresser, freshly graduated and already working at a cozy salon in the heart of downtown. Those days were filled with simplicity, just me, my scissors, and a world ripe with possibilities. It was a typical Tuesday when Daniel walked into the salon for the first time. The entry bell chimed as he entered, looking somewhat uncertain if he was in the right place. His hair was wildly untamed, with thick curls that seemed to resist any form of grooming. "Are you open for a walk-in?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the hum of hairdryers and ongoing conversations. "Absolutely. Have a seat," I replied, gesturing to my chair. As he settled in, I draped the cape around him, securing it with a snap. "What are we thinking today?" I inquired. "Just make it look like I haven't been wrestling through bushes," he joked, offering a half-smile in the mirror. I chuckled and began to work, our conversation flowing effortlessly. We discovered a shared love for classic rock over modern pop music, which neither of us could bear. "I can't stand the electronic music everywhere these days," he complained. "Tell me about it." "I'd choose Zeppelin or Floyd any day," I agreed, continuing to snip away. Our chat meandered through favorite books and movies, making it feel as though we'd been friends for ages. By the time I finished, Daniel looked transformed, and his grateful smile hinted that this wouldn't be our last encounter. True enough, he returned every couple of weeks, always ensuring he sat in my chair. Our post-haircut coffees soon evolved into dinners, and before long, we found ourselves in a deeper relationship. A year later, we married in a simple ceremony in his parents' backyard, surrounded by close family. Finances were tight, so our honeymoon was a modest 4-day stay in a lakeside cabin, quaint despite its musty smell and lingering scent of fish. But we were blissful, wrapped up in our new life together. Then came Gabriel, our son, bringing joy and new challenges. Balancing work and motherhood was tough, especially with finances stretched thin, but Daniel was an incredible support, sharing in all duties without a word of complaint. Decades flew by in a flurry of life's moments. I wasn't just any hairdresser now. I was the one people waited weeks to see. Daniel excelled too, climbing to a top position in his company. Now, in a quiet house too large for just the two of us, life felt a little more subdued. Gabriel, grown and independent, lived nearby. The salon remained a hub of activity, a place where everyone shared their stories with me, perhaps drawn by my welcoming demeanor. 28 years have indeed passed swiftly, filled with both trials and triumphs. And at 50, life is still vibrant, filled with the echoes of scissors and stories, in the little salon downtown where it all began. On a particularly rainy afternoon, the salon door swung open, and in came Violet, completely soaked from the storm outside. She looked like she needed far more than just a hair dryer, her eyes holding a sadness that immediately caught my attention. It was clear she was seeking comfort as much as a new hairstyle. "Rough day, huh?" I asked as she settled into my chair, not minding the puddles her coat left on the floor. "You could say that," she sighed, removing her soaked hat to reveal a tangled mess of hair. "Just broke up with my boyfriend." It feels like my heart's been put through a ringer. Well, you're in the right place for a pick-me-up, I told her, wrapping a towel around her shoulders. Let's dry you off and spruce up your look. How about we try something bold and new to start afresh? Violet nodded, a faint hope flickering in her eyes reflected in the mirror. I'd like that. I really would. As I worked on transforming her drenched locks into a sleek new bob, we chatted about everything from favorite TV shows to the best local eateries. It turned out she was new in town, looking for a fresh start after things went south with her ex. I found myself not only giving styling tips, but also advice on settling into our community. By the time I finished, Violet's transformation was complete. The bob framed her face perfectly, and her smile began to re-emerge. I feel lighter already, she admitted, admiring her reflection. Thanks, Alessia. Seriously. Anytime, Violet. You know where to find me, I said, handing her a mirror to check the back. Just then, my son Gabriel surprised me with a visit during work hours. He'd been running errands and decided to drop by. His gaze quickly found Violet, and I noticed that same spark that had ignited between Daniel and me years ago. Hey, Mom, who's this? Gabriel tried to sound casual, but his interest was obvious. This is Violet. Meet my son, Gabriel. He's usually not around during the day, thinks he's too busy for his old mom, I joked, giving Gabriel a playful glare. Nice to meet you, Violet. And Mom, I'm never too busy for you, Gabriel retorted with a grin. Violet laughed, clearly charmed by his demeanor. Nice to meet you too, Gabriel. Your mom's been telling me all about the town. Yeah, well, I could show you some places if you like, Gabriel offered smoothly, to which I nearly rolled my eyes. That'd be great, Violet said, her smile now bright and genuine. As they chatted about arranging a coffee outing, I tidied up my station, keeping an ear on their conversation. They clicked instantly, and soon Gabriel was leading her out to continue their chat over coffee. Watching them leave together, I felt a mix of emotions. Happiness for Gabriel finding someone who sparked his interest, yet concern too. Starting a relationship on the rebound can be complex, and I hoped he wouldn't end up heartbroken. Gabriel and Violet, who quickly became like a daughter to me, didn't waste time. They were married in a whirlwind of romance. While it was fast, seeing them so joyously made everything seem just right. We often had them over, filling our home with laughter. Violet would tease Gabriel about her taste in men, joking that she preferred them slender and athletic, prompting Gabriel to suck in his belly and flex like a bodybuilder, making us all burst into laughter. It was all in good fun, a testament to their spirited and loving relationship. After dinner, Violet would always jump up to help with the cleanup, insisting she couldn't just sit by while I did all the work. It truly warmed my heart to have such a thoughtful daughter-in-law. Meanwhile, Daniel and I were holding our own quite well. He had risen to a high position at his company and was always bustling with activity. However, subtle changes began to emerge in his routine that caught my attention. Initially, Daniel started working later and his business trips became more frequent. Whenever I questioned the extra hours or travel, he'd dismiss it with a casual, "It's just a busy season, Alessia. Got to make hay while the sun shines." I understood the demands of his job, but his newfound enthusiasm for fitness was what surprised me. One morning, I found him rummaging through our closet for workout clothes. "What's this all about?" I asked as he packed a gym bag. "Just trying to keep up with the younger guys at work," he replied with a laugh, adding, "Can't let them think I'm getting old." I teased him, leaning on the doorframe. "Well, look at you, Mr. Fitness." He grinned back, joking, "Who knows? Maybe I'll even get abs like Gabriel." The idea of Daniel, who usually avoided any strenuous activity, turning into a fitness enthusiast was amusing yet strange. However, a part of me was pleased he was taking better care of himself. Our life seemed nearly perfect. Our home was full of love and laughter. Our careers were prospering, and with Gabriel and Violet so content, the prospect of grandchildren felt just around the corner. But occasionally, when Daniel left for another sudden business trip or returned late from the gym, a nagging doubt would whisper to me. I tried to dismiss these thoughts as normal, mere adjustments in our routine. Still, I couldn't completely shake off the uneasy feeling. Watching Daniel pack for another trip, I'd ask, "Everything okay at work?" He'd reply, "Same as ever, just the grind," but his gaze didn't meet mine as it used to. I began to watch the clock more, noting his departures and arrivals, which seemed to grow increasingly irregular. His explanations became brief. Traffic delays, or helping out a colleague. One night, as I lay in bed waiting for him, the reality that despite the surface perfection, there was a fracture somewhere hit me. I hoped it was just my imagination running wild, a temporary phase that would pass because confronting any serious deviation in our marriage was something I wasn't ready to face. Then on a regular Thursday at the salon, everything changed. Lydia, a longtime client, came in excitedly sharing videos from her recent vacation. As she showed me a clip from a bustling restaurant, narrating their dining experience, my attention was abruptly captured by an image in the background, a couple in a deep kiss. My heart sank as I recognized Daniel and Violet, Gabriel's wife, entangled in the moment. Struggling to keep my composure, I managed to whisper, "Can you send that to me?" Lydia, puzzled by my sudden interest, nodded slowly and forwarded the video. My world, as perfect as it had seemed, was turning upside down. "Are you feeling okay? You seem a bit off," I asked gently, managing a weak smile. Shaking my head, I responded, "Yeah, just thought I recognized someone. Thanks." The rest of the day was a blur. My hands mechanically styled hair, but my thoughts were elsewhere, replaying a troubling video. In it, Daniel and Violet were together, an image that tormented me all day. I couldn't bring myself to call Daniel. Instead, once home, I dialed Gabriel, my voice tense but calm. "I need you to come over. It's urgent." When Gabriel arrived, his expression was laden with worry. "What's wrong, Mom?" Unable to look him in the eye, I handed him my phone, the video ready to play. "Just watch," I managed to say, my voice faltering. As he watched, the color drained from his face, his expression turning to one of shock and realization. "Dad and Violet?" His voice was a mix of disbelief and hurt. He looked at me, desperate for explanations. Before I could answer, the front door opened. Daniel and Violet entered, laughing carelessly. Daniel, still grinning, announced, "Guess who I gave a ride to today?" His cheerful banter halted as he noticed the somber mood. Gabriel slammed the phone down, the video still echoing their laughter, now horribly out of place. Daniel's smile vanished, his eyes darting between the phone and our stern faces. Violet's smile faltered as she caught on, seeing the video. The room's atmosphere shifted instantly, icy and tense. Daniel paled as if he'd seen a ghost, while Violet, with a cruel smirk, declared boldly, "I love him, Alessia. You're just too old for him." Her words were a slap. I felt a deep, hollow pain in my chest. How had I been so naive to welcome such deceit into our lives? Gabriel's anger was immediate. He stood, towering over Daniel. "I'm done with you, Dad. And you," he turned to Violet, "get out of my house?" Violet's laughter was sharp, her tone entitled. "And where am I supposed to go? I'm entitled to half of this apartment and alimony." Gabriel's reply was bitter. "The apartment was mine before we met, and it's only in my name. As for alimony, your infidelity has already settled that. You get nothing." Daniel then spoke up, his tone cold, calculating. "We need to talk about our assets, Alessia. We've been married for 28 years. I want half of everything." His audacity was astounding, focusing on finances, as if he hadn't just shattered our family. The ensuing divorce was bitter and prolonged. Each meeting was filled with venom, particularly from Daniel, who played the victim, attempting to tarnish my reputation to scrape more from the remnants of our life together. And Violet, ever spiteful, taunted me on the courthouse steps. "You're just an old woman, Alessia." Daniel wanted someone young and beautiful, like me. Her words cut deep, each one a dagger aimed to wound, highlighting a betrayal that was more than just of the heart. It was a shattering of my entire world. Throughout those long years we spent together, I would drive home feeling like a shadow of my former self, doubting my value and questioning each year we had shared. But amidst this turmoil, Gabriel, my son, was my unwavering support. His steadfast presence reminded me that not everything from my marriage was lost. Seeing his strength and moral fortitude, I realized that if my marriage had given me nothing else, it had blessed me with him. A man of integrity who stood for what was right, no matter the cost. One morning, as I stood before the mirror, I took a deep breath and made a solemn vow to myself. Alessia, it's time to start anew, from the ground up. The reflection seemed to nod in agreement, cementing my resolve. A tough decision loomed ahead concerning the house. It was too filled with memories and too large for just me. The divorce terms stipulated we sell it and divide the proceeds. Fresh start, Alessia, I whispered to myself while signing the papers at the realtor's office. Roger, a kind middle-aged agent, reassured me. Trust me, you're making the right move. Heeding his advice, I purchased a quaint two-bedroom apartment closer to the city center, ideal for one. The day I moved in, I felt a palpable sense of relief as I unpacked boxes and set up my new space, eagerly embracing the chance to create something entirely my own. The next challenge was my career. My profession had always been a core part of my identity, and I was determined not to let it go. With some capital from the divorce and a renewed zeal, I set out to open my beauty salon. Finding the perfect location took patience. I toured numerous potential sites, each time visualizing the possibilities. When I finally discovered the ideal spot, a small, luminous storefront on a bustling street, I was certain. I can see it now, I exclaimed to Gabriel, who had accompanied me for support. Alessia's elegance, right there on the sign. His smile was encouraging. It's perfect, Mom. You're going to make it something amazing. Launching the salon was an arduous journey filled with renovations, permits, and ordering supplies. Each step, though exhausting, brought a wave of accomplishment. This was my creation, my new beginning. The grand opening was a whirlwind of joy, with friends, longtime clients, and curious passers-by filling the newly vibrant space, their conversations and laughter infusing life into the once empty shop. 4 years have passed since the divorce. Reflecting, I can hardly recognize the woman I was when all this began. My business has thrived, exceeding my wildest hopes, supported wonderfully by the community. In return, I've strived to offer a welcoming and warm space. 3 years post-divorce, Gabriel remarried Lisa, whom he met at a community event. They've since welcomed twins, a boy and a girl. Seeing him so content and fulfilled has brought me a new kind of joy I never knew I was missing. Now, as I lock up the salon at night, the last rays of the sunset casting a warm glow through the front windows, I often pause and reflect on this journey. Every rise and fall, every challenge and triumph has reshaped me. I am not the same person I was, and for that, I am profoundly grateful. In those quiet moments, surrounded by the hum of hairdryers winding down, I realize how much I've grown and how much I have yet to achieve. Surrounded by the familiar scent of shampoo in my bustling salon, I found a newfound strength. The betrayal that once seemed insurmountable now fortified me, making me fiercer and more resolute than ever. Unexpectedly, I received a call from Daniel, my ex-husband. His tone casual, almost friendly, he struck with words that stung sharply. Alessia, I think it's only fair I get half of your beauty salon. It's doing well, and frankly, it was started with my money, since I was the main breadwinner for so long. His audacity was breathtaking, claiming a share of the very business I built with my post-divorce earnings. Although infuriated, I responded calmly, okay, Daniel, let's meet and discuss it. After hanging up, I immediately called Gabriel, who was livid upon hearing Daniel's demand. He suggested we dig deeper into Daniel's current affairs, even proposing we hire a private investigator. Agreeing, it was time to expose whatever Daniel and his new partner were concealing. We decided to meet in a crowded downtown cafe. Arriving early, I spotted them from afar. Daniel, looking older but striving for youthfulness, and his significantly younger wife Violet, who was visibly pregnant. As I sat down, bracing for their charade, Daniel wasted no time. Alessia, thanks for coming. With the baby on the way, Violet wants to start her salon. We think a share of your business would be a good start for our family's future. Violet smirked smugly at me, as if the battle was already won. I forced a smile, listening to Daniel's grand plans for his new family, thinking how deluded he was. When he finally paused, I seized the moment. Daniel, you're living in a fantasy. This business you so desire was built entirely without your money or influence. And about this child you're so excited for, I paused, my smile fading as I slid a series of photos across the table. The photos clearly showed Violet with another man, not just casually, but leaving a hotel together. And there's more, I continued, my voice steady amidst the unfolding drama. Daniel, remember when you had chickenpox so severely at 37? The doctor said it left you infertile. I didn't have the heart to tell you then, thinking it would crush you. The color drained from Daniel's face, and Violet's eyes widened in horror. Turning to him, her hands trembling, she faced his stunned silence. You're lying, Violet shrieked, her voice cracking under the strain. Daniel, hit by the truth, turned to Violet, his face twisted in anger. Is this true? Are you cheating on me? The cafe had fallen silent, all eyes riveted on our table. Violet began sobbing, her earlier arrogance dissolving into public humiliation. Daniel, I can explain, she stammered, but Daniel was already on his feet, shouting, I don't want to hear it. We're done. Get out of my life. His outburst caused a scene, marking the collapse of his world. As he stormed out, the echoes of their disrupted lives lingered in the silent cafe. I rose from my chair, smoothing down my skirt with deliberate calmness. I think this meeting is over, I declared, ensuring my voice carried clearly to the nearby tables. I want nothing more to do with either of you. As I walked away, the last image I held was of Violet crying and Daniel shouting, while the cafe staff hurried over to intervene. Stepping out into the sunlight, I felt a significant burden lift from my shoulders. A few days later, in the serene aftermath of a bustling day at the salon, the familiar jingle of the bell over the door caught my attention. I looked up to see Gabriel entering, his face lit with a joyful smile. Hey, Mom, how's the champion of independence doing today? He teased as he walked over to embrace me. I chuckled, handing him a broom to help clean up. Oh, stop it, I playfully scolded, but I won't lie, it feels really good. That's what I like to hear, Gabriel responded, beginning to sweep. So, what's next for you? I paused, leaning on my broom, and shared the thoughts that had been forming in my mind. Well, I've been thinking about that a lot. I want to do more than just run the salon. I want to give back somehow. Gabriel looked thoughtful as he nodded. You've got a lot to offer, Mom. Maybe some kind of mentorship program? For young women starting out? That's exactly what I was thinking, I replied, excitement rising within me. I want to help them build their futures, ensure they have the support they need. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as I put our ideas into motion. I reached out to local community centers and schools, setting up workshops and talks. The response was incredible. Many young women attended, eager to learn and grow. One evening, after a particularly successful workshop, I sat in my salon, reflecting on the transformative journey. The phone rang, and I answered it in a thoughtful mood. Alessia's Elegance. This is Alessia. Mom, it's me. Gabriel's cheerful voice came through. Just wanted to check in. How was the workshop today? It was fantastic, Gabriel. These girls, they're so bright and full of potential. It makes me feel like I'm doing something worthwhile, I replied, a smile spreading across my face. That's awesome, Mom. I knew you'd be great at this. We chatted a bit more, and after hanging up, I was enveloped by a profound sense of peace. I had come so far from the woman who thought her life was over after the divorce. Now here I was, making a real impact, feeling more fulfilled than ever before. In the sweltering heat of Qatar's desert, I felt as if the warmth had become a part of me, wrapping around me like a second skin. Standing on the old wooden pier, I idly kicked my sandals against the time-worn boards, my eyes drawn to a procession of sleek, high-end cars cruising by. The drivers, mostly young men sporting sharp haircuts and designer shades, seemed to slow their vehicles just enough to cast long, assessing looks my way. "Nice view, huh?" The deep, unexpected voice made me start, and I turned to see a tall man with sun-bleached hair and a confident smile leaning casually against the railing nearby. He carried himself with a certain arrogance that I usually found off-putting, but tonight, it didn't irk me as much. "Yeah," I replied nonchalantly, my gaze returning to the horizon where the sun dipped low, painting the sky in vivid hues. "Sunsets are pretty common here, though, wouldn't you say?" He laughed, a warm, inviting sound. "Maybe common, but still pretty impressive. And those cars," he added, gesturing towards a cherry-red Ferrari that had just stopped further down the pier, from which a glamorous woman was stepping out, "are definitely not common." "Nope," I agreed with a smirk. "Those are a rare sight." His eyes sparkled with amusement. "You don't seem too taken with all this glitz and glamour." Leaning back against the railing, I crossed my arms. "It wears off. It seems like everyone here measures their worth by their bank balance." Raising an eyebrow, he asked, "So what measures yours?" His question caught me off guard. Growing up as the daughter of a billionaire who co-owned a massive American chocolate empire, I'd seen enough of the world to last a lifetime, which is why I chose to forge my path in Qatar, far from my father's shadow. "Well," I hesitated, not sure how much to disclose. "I value hard work and making your way in the world." He observed me intently for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. I'm Aiden, by the way," he said, extending his hand. "Mira," I replied, shaking his hand. His touch sent a surprising jolt through me. Weeks later, as we lounged by the pool at his upscale hotel, sipping cocktails under the shimmering city lights, Aiden revealed that his company was searching for someone with my qualifications. "We could use someone like you," he stated casually. "Your company?" I looked up sharply. "Yeah," he shrugged. "It's a major investment firm in the States. We're always looking for talented people." His gaze locked with mine. "So, what do you say?" Interested in a change of scenery from the usual Qatar sunsets. The proposal sent my heart racing. The idea of starting anew, particularly with Aiden, was thrilling yet daunting. I hesitated, my inner doubts surfacing. "I don't know. It's a big step." He leaned in, his voice low and persuasive. "I know, but it could be an incredible adventure for you." After a moment of mixed emotions, I decided to take the risk. However, maintaining my independence was crucial. I couldn't simply move in with Aiden. Instead, I found a modest apartment in a typical neighborhood, far from the opulent lifestyle he was accustomed to. This way, I could explore this new chapter on my terms, keeping my carefully crafted identity intact. I decided not to tell my father about my new chapter in the States just yet. He was always caught up in a whirlwind of international business trips, and I wasn't quite sure how he would react to my recent adventures in Qatar, not to mention my budding relationship with Aiden. Only a few weeks after settling into my new role at Aiden's company, I was already making strides. The job was demanding, but I thrived, feeling a sense of fulfillment that had eluded me in Qatar. One evening, after a particularly taxing day, all I wanted was to sink into my old, comfy couch. But as I walked in, I froze. There, in my modest living room, sat my father. He looked utterly out of place in a space that clearly screamed budget living. My jaw dropped in shock. "Dad." The word barely made it out as my voice cracked. With a slow, familiar smile, he replied, "Well, Mira, seems a father can visit his daughter, even in her humble abode. How did you find me?" I asked, my mind racing for explanations. He shrugged a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Let's just say a father has his ways, especially when his daughter jets off to Qatar and then pops up working at a top investment firm across the ocean." I swallowed hard, realizing he knew everything. The world seemed to spin slightly off-kilter. "I just needed a new start," I mumbled, avoiding his gaze. a chance to build something for myself on my terms. He nodded slowly, understandingly. I get that, he said earnestly. But, honey, pretending to be someone you're not isn't the way to do it. Taking a deep breath, I decided it was time to be fully honest. It was time he knew everything, even if it meant revealing my carefully constructed facade. Over the next hour, I poured out my heart, telling him about my life in Qatar, the job I'd secured, and, most importantly, about Aiden. He listened intently, his expression unreadable. After I finished, a weighty silence hung in the air. Finally, he studied me for a long moment, then his face broke into a slow smile. It wasn't exactly approval, but it wasn't disapproval either. All right, he chuckled, pride evident in his voice. Looks like you've grown up quite a bit. Just be careful, okay? This world can be tough. I will, I promised, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. The next year was a blur of hard work and stolen moments with Aiden. The pressures of the firm were immense, but I excelled, and my efforts and intelligence finally gained the recognition they deserved. A year later, I was promoted to associate partner, a significant achievement in the cutthroat world of investment banking. One evening, while cooking dinner in my tiny apartment, Aiden still hadn't convinced me to move in. He suddenly dropped to one knee, a sparkling diamond ring catching the candlelight. Mira, he began, his voice laden with emotion. You're the smartest, most beautiful woman I know. Will you marry me? Tears welled up in my eyes as I choked out a joyful yes, and threw my arms around him. At that moment, I knew I was the happiest woman alive. Wedding planning began immediately. We opted for a simple ceremony on a secluded beach in the Maldives, envisioning a day that was just about us, Aiden and I, celebrating our love without any ostentation. As the ocean breeze gently swept across the shoreline, I contemplated the simplicity of our upcoming wedding. Despite my background, a lavish ceremony was the last thing I wanted. It was essential to keep my past under wraps. Still, there was someone I needed to update. Hey, Dad, I began, my voice a cocktail of excitement and apprehension. On the other end, his familiar chuckle eased some of my nerves. It's time for some news. Go ahead, kiddo, he encouraged. Aiden and we're getting married, I announced. A pause hung in the air before he responded with a seriousness that was uncharacteristic. Honey, I'm happy for you, but coming to the wedding might not be the best idea. It could stir up more attention than you'd want. My heart dropped, understanding the weight of his words. His high-profile presence could unravel the discreet life I had built. Okay, I conceded softly, forcing a smile into my voice. He cleared his throat, adding, and Mira, make sure you guys are thinking ahead. A prenup wouldn't hurt. His practical advice didn't surprise me. It made sense given our distinct backgrounds. Sure, Dad, I replied, embracing his suggestion wholeheartedly. Meeting Aiden's family introduced a different set of challenges. His mother, draped in elegance and exuding wealth, gave me a lukewarm smile that barely masked her scrutiny. Aiden hasn't told us much about your work, she probed, her sweetness tinged with insincerity. Aiden, ever so naive to the undercurrents, beamed with pride. She's an associate partner at a prestigious investment firm, Mom. She's incredibly talented. Her smile tightened. An investment firm, how interesting. The evening rolled on with subtle jabs and pointed inquiries about our financial arrangements. Calm and collected, I addressed each one. We've already discussed a prenup, I informed her, my tone both cool and assured. Her reaction was a mix of startled respect and reluctant admiration. The wedding day itself was exactly as I had hoped, simple and beautiful, with just me, Aiden, and the rhythmic sound of waves crashing against the shore, sealing our promises to each other. A few weeks later, back in New York, Aiden surprised me with the keys to a beautiful house in a tranquil, upscale neighborhood. It wasn't a mansion, but it was perfect for us. As we stood in the foyer, surrounded by unpacked boxes, I felt a wave of contentment. Life was not exactly as I had planned, but it was genuinely fulfilling. However, as time passed, the glow of my professional successes seemed to cast a shadow over Aiden's spirits. His congratulations, once warm and enthusiastic, now felt perfunctory. The joy in his eyes seemed to dim with each of my achievements. Then came the merger, an enormous success for the firm and a personal triumph for me. I rushed to share the news with Aiden, only to find him subdued, his reaction a complex mix of astonishment and restraint. "You did good, babe," he said, the strain evident in his voice. It felt like praise forced out rather than freely given. A chill of realization crept over me. Could my successes be diminishing him somehow? At home, his mother was no help, her expertise in passive aggression shining through. Back in my day, she would often start, her voice dripping with condescension, wives focused on their homes, not playing at business. Navigating this new dynamic was challenging. I had to tread carefully, balancing my professional aspirations with the personal pressures at home, all the while questioning how to maintain my happiness without overshadowing those I loved. The day Aiden barged into our house, his face stormy and his mood darker than I had ever seen it, my heart sank. Without a word, he threw down a thick envelope on the kitchen table. "Severance package," he growled, his voice cold. "The staff, cleaners, cooks, gardeners, they're all gone. Looks like you'll finally have to make this house a home." Anger surged within me, but it was swiftly washed away by a wave of fear. I didn't want a divorce. I wanted the man I had married, the loving Aiden, to return. In a desperate attempt to mend our fraying relationship, I decided to embrace the role of homemaker, believing that if I could create the perfect domestic sanctuary, perhaps Aiden would see my value again. A part of me longed to call my father, to seek his advice and possibly his help, but pride held me back. I couldn't bear to let him see the mess I was in. This was my battle to handle. Months later, to smooth over the growing rift, Aiden planned a cruise on his luxurious yacht. The sun glared off the polished deck as we sailed, his mother, Sophia, in a garish white pantsuit adorned with excessive diamonds, holding court among her affluent friends. They cackled over champagne, their laughter grating against the rhythmic slap of the waves. Aiden, ever the attentive son, hovered around, refilling glasses and forcing laughter at his mother's stale jokes. I managed a strained smile, trying to ignore the knot of discomfort in my stomach. As the day progressed, champagne loosened Sophia's tongue, transforming her polite mask into a spiteful sneer. Swinging towards me with a glass in hand, she slurred, "It takes a special kind of woman to give up a promising career to scrub toilets." Her companions erupted in harsh laughter, their glee cutting through me like a blade. I remained silent, not wanting to escalate the tension. Aiden, oblivious or indifferent, laughed along, praising my newfound domestic skills. "That's right, Ma. Myra's a real domestic goddess now." The evening spiraled with each passing hour. Each jab from Sophia met with nothing but feeble jokes from Aiden. I felt reduced to a mere trophy wife, my silence misread as submission. As darkness fell and the yacht neared a cluster of small islands, I'd had enough. I approached the captain, a seasoned sailor named Jackson, and said firmly, "I need to get off this boat." He looked at me with concern. "Here? In the middle of nowhere?" "Yes," I affirmed, my resolve hardening. "There's an island nearby. Please, drop me off and notify the Coast Guard." A few minutes later, the yacht slowed near my chosen island. As I moved towards the railing, clutch in hand, Aiden finally took notice. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, irritation sharp in his voice. "Somewhere you don't want me to be," I retorted, my decision clear. "Consider this marriage over. Both you and your precious mother are unworthy of any more of my time." Sophia, spurred on by alcohol and my defiance, cackled. "You think you can just walk away? You've been living off his money." Aiden's face twisted in anger as he lunged for my purse, ripping it from my hands. "These are my credit cards, Mira. Leave if you must, but leave everything." As I stepped onto the small boat that would take me to shore, leaving behind the toxic atmosphere and the stifling confines of a loveless marriage, I felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I was finally taking a stand, not just for my dignity, but for my happiness. This was the start of a new chapter, one where I would no longer be overshadowed or underestimated. By the break of dawn, I expected to see her stranded on that island, pitiful and desperate. As I observed the two of them, devoid of compassion and warmth, I felt an unusual calm envelop me. "Perhaps," I replied, locking eyes with Aiden, "but at least I'll retain my dignity." Aiden's yacht floated nonchalantly at anchor, echoes of raucous laughter drifting from it. I stood on the dock, the chilly night breeze providing relief from the yacht's oppressive revelry. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows. His uniform sharply contrasted the yacht's festive environment as he marched determinedly toward it. His voice resonated over the water. "Ahoy! This island is private, and access is restricted. Understand?" His tone carried the weight of authority. Aiden, still flushed from his previous outburst, leaned over the railing, baffled. "What? Who are you?" The man, a security guard named Gabriel whom I had discreetly informed earlier, an act of quiet rebellion that felt incredibly satisfying, stood firm. "Security," he stated simply. "Looks like you're lost. You need to leave within 3 hours." Aiden scoffed. 3 hours? We just arrived. And why should we listen to you? Gabriel, unyielding, replied in a lower tone. "You don't want to cross the owner of this island. He's a man of significant influence. It's in your best interest not to antagonize him." As Sophia began to realize what was happening, she leaned in, her voice overly sweet. "Oh, but surely a little longer won't hurt." Gabriel then turned to me, his expression softening upon recognition. He saluted crisply. "Miss Lambert," he announced, his voice carrying across the waters. "Your private plane is prepared and awaiting your departure. Shall we proceed to the airstrips?" The air was electric with tension. Aiden's complexion turned pale, and Sophia's mouth fell open in shock. This was the moment of truth. I smiled broadly, walking toward Gabriel and embracing him warmly. "Thank you, Gabriel. You and your team have done an exemplary job," he responded, slightly embarrassed by my show of gratitude. "Just doing my job, Miss Lambert." Aiden, regaining his voice, stammered. "Wait, Lambert? What?" Ignoring him, I followed Gabriel, my spirits uplifted. The world seemed more vibrant, the air fresher. "Plane's all ready," Gabriel mentioned casually. "Ready to take you wherever you need to go, Miss Lambert." Behind us, Sophia gasped in disbelief. "You're the daughter of..." She didn't need to finish. The truth was apparent. Aiden, finally understanding, stumbled after me. "Mira, wait. Please come back." His voice was tinged with desperation I never thought possible just hours before. But I continued forward, empowered by newfound strength, their apologies and pleas fading into the background. The sound of the approaching plane was a symphony of liberation, transporting me toward a future defined on my terms. The next morning, with the taste of freedom still lingering, I walked into the office of a notorious divorce attorney, a relentless shark, handpicked for this very purpose. He rifled through some documents, ready to dive into the fray. A smirk spread across his face. "Hold on a second. It seems during your tenure at Aiden's esteemed company, you orchestrated several multi-million-dollar deals. Oddly enough, there's no mention of a bonus in your contract, is there?" A slow burn ignited in my chest. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had tried to cheat me. The lawyer, sensing my mounting fury, gave my hand a reassuring pat. "Don't worry, my dear. We'll secure everything you're owed. The divorce settlement, backdated bonuses, the whole lot." He kept his promise. The divorce proceedings were quick and ruthless. Aiden, deflated and subdued, sat opposite me, his swagger replaced by a sullen demeanor. The judge, a stern woman unfazed by any intimidation, granted me a substantial settlement, including the backdated bonuses that my ex had conveniently neglected. As I exited the courtroom, a triumphant smile adorned my face. As I passed Aiden, I noticed his red-rimmed eyes and slouched posture. "Mira," he murmured, his voice a mere whisper. "Everyone's laughing at me, my friends." "I miss you." He reached out, but I recoiled. His pathetic attempt only fortified my determination. Miss you? You never truly saw me, Aiden. You were too engrossed with your mother's advice to notice the woman right in front of you. He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't let him. Here's some free advice. Next time, maybe listen more to the strong, capable woman you marry if there is a next time. The following day, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Sophia's name. A scoff escaped me as she cooed with feigned affection. Mira, darling, Aiden is devastated. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive him and start over? Her audacity was astounding. I laughed heartily, the sound rising genuinely from deep within. Forgive him? Start over? Sophia, the only thing starting over is my life, and it certainly won't include either of you. Before she could spew more manipulations, I ended the conversation with, "This call is over, and by the way, your number is now blocked." With a decisive click, I hung up. The air was charged with promise as I stood at the entrance of my new foundation's office. The walls were adorned with the aspirations of budding entrepreneurs, their innovative ideas poised for support and launch. This was my new arena, and this time I was championing the good guys, empowered by the generous settlement to make a real difference. With wise investments in my portfolio, money was the least of my worries. But more importantly, the recent court case had ignited a deep well of determination within me. I was not just going to rebuild my life. I was set on helping others craft their own. The Mira Evans Foundation became my tool for fighting mediocrity, a launching pad for those brimming with talent and ambition. The foundation's inaugural day was a bustling scene of activity. Hopeful individuals streamed into the office, each person carrying a unique vision and a fierce determination to leave their Gabriel on the world. Mentors moved through the crowd, offering advice and encouragement, filling the room with an electric buzz of shared purpose. Just as the day began to wind down, the office door swung open, and in walked a familiar figure that made my jaw drop. It was my father. His laughter filled the room as he saw my astonished face. "Surprised your old man can find his way around without a map?" he joked. A wave of warmth washed over me.
"Dad."
"What are you doing here?" I exclaimed as he pulled me into a comforting hug, his familiar scent grounding me. "I thought I'd come and see how the big boss lady is running things," he winked, adding humorously, "Besides, your fancy foundation doesn't need another broke dreamer on its payroll, does it?" I laughed, the tension easing from my shoulders. "Dad, it's not about the money. It's about giving people a chance." He nodded, his gaze turning serious. "And you, sweetheart, are giving yourself a hell of a chance." A blush crept over my cheeks as I thought about my past with Aiden. "I should have listened to you, Dad." He squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Listen, sometimes you have to learn things the hard way. That's life. But what matters is you learned, and you came out on the other side stronger and wiser." He glanced around the office, his eyes twinkling with pride. "This is something special, Mira Evans. Something you built yourself. And no matter what life throws your way, remember, you've always got a home here with me." As he turned to leave, I grabbed his arm. "Thanks, Dad," I whispered, the words thick with gratitude for his unwavering support. He smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. "Anytime, kiddo." With a final wave, he walked out the door, leaving behind a renewed sense of purpose in me. The future might be uncertain, but armed with the lessons I've learned and the love of my family, I knew I was ready to face whatever came next. Hello, I'm Emma. My life has always followed a predictable pattern: college, job, saving money, and the hope of eventually owning a small place to call my own. I work at a travel agency, which is quite ironic since I spend my days surrounded by images of places I've never been to. My routine was simple: work, home, sleep, and repeat. Then one day, out of nowhere, I received a call from Oliver, an old college friend. "Hey Emma, long time no see. Guess what? I'm organizing a camping trip this weekend. You should come," He excitedly proposed as soon as I answered the phone. I hesitated, but before I could object, he added, "Come on, Emma. It's just a weekend. You need a break. What's the point of selling dreams if you never live one yourself?" Oliver was persuasive, and knowing I would eventually agree, I relented. Okay, send me the details, I said, slightly regretting my decision as we ended the call. However, a part of me felt a flicker of excitement, something I hadn't felt in quite some time. The rest of the week flew by in a whirl of preparations. I found my old camping gear and purchased new hiking boots since my old ones were beyond repair, and by Friday, I felt as prepared as I could be. The next morning was crisp and clear. I drove to our meeting spot, a quaint coffee shop where our group was gathering. Oliver, ever the lively one, was already there, welcoming everyone with his loud hellos. He introduced me to the group. "This is Emma, guys. We went to college together. She's a pro at booking your dream vacation, but never takes one herself." I forced a smile through the group's laughter. As we began our hike, the reality of what I had signed up for started to sink in. The path was steeper than I anticipated. My backpack felt like a ton, and the new boots were torture devices. About an hour in, I was seriously reconsidering my life choices. That's when I met Dylan, a friend of a friend. He was tall, with an easygoing smile, and noticed my struggle. "First time hiking in a while?" he asked, seeing my clumsy steps. "Is it that obvious?" I replied, out of breath. He laughed and offered to carry my backpack to ease my climb. I hesitated but accepted, feeling both relieved and embarrassed. "Thanks, I guess I'm not as fit as I thought," I admitted. As we walked, Dylan shared stories of his travels and misadventures, which made the time pass more quickly. I found myself laughing more than I had in months. By the time we set up camp, I was tired but invigorated. The evening was filled with campfire stories and marshmallows. Dylan stayed close, and we talked well into the night under the starlit sky. Waking up in a tent was unusual for me, but there I was on Sunday morning, stiff but excited by the chirping birds outside. I put on my boots, which felt slightly less torturous than the day before, and stepped out into the fresh morning air. Dylan was already up, making coffee on a small camp stove. He flashed a smile as I approached. "Morning, Emma. Sleep well?" he asked. "Better than I expected," I replied, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "What's that smell?" "Coffee," he said. "Thought it might help kickstart the day. Want some?" Gratefully, I accepted the warm cup, sipping carefully as the caffeine began to revive me. As everyone else began to wake up, Oliver called us to gather around. "All right, team, today's trek is a bit tougher," he started, outlining the day's plans. "Let's stick together and remember, nobody gets left behind, okay?" I glanced at Dylan, hoping he would stay close. He caught on, giving me a subtle nod, and we began our hike at a brisk pace through the increasingly dense forest. The trail was strewn with roots and rocks, demanding our full attention. Dylan walked by my side, engaging me in a continuous flow of conversation that distracted me from my sore muscles. "So, Emma, what made you finally agree to a trip like this?" he inquired as we tackled a particularly challenging section of the path. I chuckled. Oliver was on my case about it. He joked that I was turning into office furniture. Guess I needed to prove him wrong. Eventually, the path led us to a stunning clearing, offering a majestic view of the distant mountains. We paused for a break, everyone catching their breath and admiring the view. I dropped my backpack with a heavy thud and plopped down next to it. Dylan joined me, handing over a water bottle. "You're doing great, Emma." "Seriously," he encouraged. "Thanks, Dylan. This is tougher than I thought, but I'm really glad I came," I admitted, taking in the surrounding natural beauty. We enjoyed a few moments of peaceful silence, appreciating the tranquility of the wilderness. It was a new experience for me, this quiet companionship, and I found myself not wanting it to end. As we prepared to resume our hike, Dylan offered his hand to help me up. "Ready for the next part?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, accepting his help. The morning flew by in a blur of lush greenery and occasional wildlife sightings. As we began packing up to return to camp, Dylan stayed back with me. Hey Emma, there's a small waterfall not too far from here. Want to check it out before we head back? Although my body yearned for rest, curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed. Sure, why not? Lead the way. That detour felt like an adventure within an adventure. The waterfall was a breathtaking hidden gem, secluded from the well-trodden path. Watching the water cascade down, I felt a profound shift inside me. Perhaps it was the sheer beauty of the place, or maybe it was the company I was with, but I knew this moment would stay with me forever. Life has a way of appending your plans. 3 years after that camping trip, Dylan and I got married in a simple, joyful ceremony, though his mother, Mrs. Zoe, barely managed to smile, never hiding her disapproval of me. 3 years later, Dylan proposed a significant change. Emma, we should consider moving in with my mom. Since Dad passed, she's been all alone in that big house, and I worry about her. I was chopping vegetables for dinner and nearly cut myself at his suggestion. Live with your mom? Dylan, you know she isn't fond of me. He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. I know it's not ideal, but she's my mom, and we need to take care of her. Reluctantly, I agreed, out of love for Dylan. The day we moved in, Mrs. Zoe greeted us with a stiff smile and a list of house rules she had prepared. I tried to stay positive, but the tension was palpable that evening. As Dylan was busy arranging our bedroom, his mother took the opportunity to corner me in the kitchen. Emma, remember this house is still mine, and I expect it to be kept to a certain standard, she stated, eyeing my method of organizing the pantry shelves. I responded with a nod, keeping my composure. Of course, Mrs. Zoe. I'll do my utmost. She sighed, a touch of impatience in her voice. Please make an effort to maintain cleanliness, and don't think it's all right to simply relax all day. There's much to be done here. Her remarks were cutting, but I managed to hold back my emotions. I understand. I'll make sure to keep everything up to your standards. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the challenge of living with Mrs. Zoe was just as I had anticipated. She constantly commented on everything I did. For my cooking, it's too spicy, Emma. Not everyone wants their taste buds assaulted. To my laundry techniques, you're folding those sheets incorrectly. On a particularly difficult day, Dylan found me in tears while I was deep cleaning the kitchen floor. What's going on? He asked, kneeling beside me. It's just your mom. No matter how hard I try, she's never pleased with anything I do. He put his arm around me, offering comfort. I'm sorry, Emma. I see how much effort you're putting in. I'll have a word with her, okay? His discussion with her seemed to help somewhat, as Mrs. Zoe started to hold back on her critiques. She remained distant, yet the barrage of daily criticisms lessened. Over time, we managed to find a strained sort of rhythm in our cohabitation. The topic of children soon arose. I longed to start a family, but after months of no success, anxiety began to set in. During a quiet moment one evening, while washing dishes with Dylan, I broached my worries. Dylan, do you think something might be wrong? Should we consider seeing a doctor? He continued scrubbing a plate, avoiding eye contact. I'm not sure, Emma. Let's not jump to conclusions. These things often take time. The lack of progress was disheartening, but he seemed reluctant to delve deeper. Amid these trials, I sought comfort in creating a space within the house. I took up gardening, an endeavor I'd always imagined undertaking. To my surprise, even Mrs. Zoe seemed to acknowledge my efforts, albeit gruffly, on one occasion. You seem to have a real talent for gardening, she commented one day as she watched me prune the roses. Grateful for any semblance of approval, I smiled warmly. Thank you, Mrs. Zoe. I appreciate your kind words. In an unexpected turn, Dylan suggested I leave my job to focus on home life, and I agreed, becoming a full-time homemaker. My days were filled with juggling household responsibilities, caring for Mrs. Zoe, and managing the shifting dynamics of our household. Dylan's behavior began to change as well. He stayed late at work more often, too tired to engage when he returned, and frequently opted to sleep in the spare room, citing the need for undisturbed rest. One evening, as I was repairing a leaky faucet, Dylan's sister, Abigail, visited unexpectedly. Still the devoted wife in this old place. Emma, she scoffed, scanning the dim kitchen. I defended my new life. It's not as bad as it seems, Abigail. You get used to it. She let out a scornful laugh that resonated through the room. Typical for you, isn't it? Old-fashioned and lonely. Seems to suit you perfectly. Before I could answer her, she quickly turned to her mom. Mom, I need some money for the usual things, you know the drill. Mrs. Zoe, without skipping a beat, reached for her checkbook. Her hands were trembling, but her resolve was clear as she wrote out a check for her daughter. Shortly after Abigail's visit, Mrs. Zoe's health began to decline significantly. One day, she called me into her room, her voice much weaker than before. Emma, could you help me with my bath today? I'm really struggling, she asked softly. I nodded, fighting back tears, and replied gently, Of course, Mrs. Zoe. As I supported her, her typically stern demeanor softened. By the time we finished, tears were streaming down her face. Thank you, dear. It seems my daughter can't be bothered to help, she murmured. It's no trouble at all, I soothed her, assisting her back to her room. That day was a turning point in our relationship. She began to view me more as a daughter than merely a guest staying in her home. However, while I grew closer to Mrs. Zoe, her son Dylan became more aloof. I once overheard him talking about a new apartment he had bought close to his workplace. Later, I casually asked him, Could you show me the apartment sometime? Trying to keep the tone light. It's just a regular place, Emma. There's nothing special about it. It's not a museum, he snapped, quickly shutting down the conversation. His coldness was a sting, but what truly hurt came several days later, when Mrs. Zoe summoned me. With urgent whispers, she revealed, He bought that apartment with my money, Emma. It's in my name, and he even uses my savings for the bills. My heart dropped. Why would he do that? I asked in disbelief. She shook her head, her eyes filled with sorrow. I'm not sure, dear, but be cautious. There's something not right with Dylan. Throughout these difficult times, Mrs. Zoe, my unexpected ally, began treating me with a newfound warmth. One relaxed, sunlit afternoon as we sat together in the parlor, I broached a subject I had been contemplating. Mrs. Zoe, have you thought about giving this old place a makeover? I asked. Her eyes roamed the room, lingering on the faded photographs and peeling wallpaper. Perhaps a little refreshment wouldn't hurt, she admitted, her voice tinged with rare nostalgia. Encouraged, I proposed a more thorough transformation. How about we shake things up? Some fresh paint, revitalized furniture, new curtains. It could transform the atmosphere here. Intrigued, she raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? Energized by her interest, I detailed my ideas for vibrant paint and updated furniture. Mrs. Zoe nodded thoughtfully. That sounds lovely. It's been forever since we've changed anything here. Think you can handle that? Absolutely, I assured her, excitement rising within me. The following day, equipped with paint samples and fabric swatches, I set out to revitalize the old mansion. The work was demanding but fulfilling, infusing new life into these old walls. As I was removing wallpaper in the dining room, Mrs. Zoe stopped by, leaning on her cane. You're committed to this, aren't you? She noted, watching me work. I am, I confirmed, grinning through my sweat. This place will feel completely transformed. She laughed, a sound so infrequent that it almost startled me. At this rate, I might not even recognize my own home, she remarked with a wry smile. Days melted into weeks as we gradually transformed the residence. The once somber and dim hues were replaced by bright, inviting colors. We tore out the old, musty carpets to reveal stunning hardwood floors beneath, which we polished until they gleamed. Dylan's visits became even scarcer, but one evening, he unexpectedly arrived while I was hanging new curtains in the living room. What the hell is all this? What have you done to my house? He exploded, his gaze rapidly taking in the renovated space. Just then, Mrs. Zoe entered the room. It's my house, Dylan. I want it to be beautiful. Emma is doing an excellent job, she declared firmly. Dylan's face tightened with frustration. Fine, he snapped, before storming off to another part of the house. Despite his outburst, we continued our work. Mrs. Zoe and I chose new furniture, opting for lighter, more contemporary pieces that still honored the home's original charm. Each new piece seemed to elevate her spirits, and mine as well. Just as we were settling into our refreshed surroundings, Mrs. Zoe's health abruptly deteriorated. One morning, I found her slumped over in her chair, barely able to speak. I immediately pressed the panic button, and within hours, we were in the emergency room. The doctors, moving swiftly around her, soon confirmed she had suffered a stroke. She was quickly taken for further treatment, leaving me pacing the sterile hospital corridors alone. Neither Dylan nor Abigail appeared during her hospital stay. Over the following weeks, I was her constant visitor. I sat by her bedside daily, holding her hand, talking about the house to lift her spirits, while she looked on blankly, her body weak, her spirit dimmed. When she finally returned home, she was a shadow of her former self, confined to her bed, her movements sluggish and her speech slurred. It was on her first day back that Dylan and Abigail decided to make an appearance. They brushed past me in the hallway and went straight to Mrs. Zoe's room, where they began discussing her assets as though she were not even there. "Mom's got that savings account. We should look into that," Abigail remarked, rifling through some documents she shouldn't have possessed. "Yeah, and the house. We need to start thinking about what to do with it," Dylan added, not bothering to lower his voice. Mrs. Zoe's eyes brimmed with tears, her hands shaking. Witnessing her vulnerability tore at my heart. I couldn't restrain myself any longer. "Can you three stop? She's right here, listening to all this," I burst out. Dylan turned to me, his face contorting in annoyance. "This is family business, Emma. Stay out of it," he snapped. Abigail scoffed. "Yeah, just because you play nurse doesn't mean you have a say." Their words stung, but I refused to let them intimidate me or diminish my resolve. "She's my family too, and I'm not going to let you treat her like this," I countered firmly. From that day forward, I dedicated myself even more to her care. I researched stroke recovery, learned exercises to help her regain mobility, and regularly massaged her limbs to prevent them from stiffening. Gradually, she began to show signs of improvement. It was slow and laborious, but progress was evident. She started eating on her own, a determined look on her face each time she attempted to walk with my support. Dylan and Abigail observed her recovery with evident displeasure, as every bit of progress Mrs. Zoe made seemed to thwart their plans for her assets. One evening, after a particularly strenuous set of exercises, as I helped Mrs. Zoe back into bed, her grateful smile told me all I needed to know about her appreciation for my efforts. She gazed up at me with clarity in her eyes that I hadn't seen in weeks. "Thank you, Emma," she whispered, her voice weak yet resolute. "You're my real family." It had been a relatively peaceful year. The mansion slowly transformed into a warm home under my care. But this peace was shattered the morning I discovered Mrs. Zoe had passed away in her sleep. Her departure was as quiet and dignified as the gentle side of her I had grown to cherish. The funeral felt surreal, a blur of faces and condolences. I was in the parlor, greeting mourners still in a daze, when Dylan walked in. The surprise wasn't just from seeing him after his long absences over the past year, but from the woman by his side and the children clinging to her. "This is my wife, Camila, and these are my children." Dylan introduced them plainly, as if no explanation was needed. His words cut sharply through the hushed whispers of the crowd. Then he turned to me, his voice cold and dismissive. "Emma, you need to leave. We'll be moving in." I stood frozen, trying to digest his words when Abigail's laughter pierced through my shock. "Finally, this house will see some proper life again." Before I could gather myself, Mr. Jackson, the notary, summoned us to the living room for the reading of the will, a heavy tension enveloping us all. Mr. Jackson pulled out the documents from his briefcase. "Let's proceed with the reading of Marjorie Zoe's last will and testament," he announced. Dylan and Abigail positioned themselves confidently, seemingly prepared to claim their inheritance. I remained by the window, the gravity of the moment pressing down on me. "Marjorie Zoe declared in her last will and testament," Mr. Jackson began, "to Emma, who has been more than a daughter to me, I leave all my property, including the mansion and all my financial assets. Furthermore, The apartment purchased by my son Dylan will also revert to Emma, as it was acquired with funds I provided. The room fell deathly silent. Dylan's face flushed with anger, his fists balled up. This is ridiculous. You must have forced her into this, Emma. Abigail was quick to support her brother, her tone harsh and accusatory. You're nothing but a gold digger. Mom was old and confused. You took advantage of her. Despite my racing heart, I maintained my composure. I didn't force anyone. I cared for her when you wouldn't, I responded calmly. Mr. Jackson adjusted his glasses, clearing his throat. There is also a video statement from Marjorie, if you will, he said, setting up a laptop. The screen flickered on, and Mrs. Zoe appeared, looking frail but determined. If you're watching this, I am no longer here. I have left everything to Emma. In these past years, she has shown me kindness, compassion, and loyalty more than my children ever did. This is my thank you to her, my final wish. As the video concluded, the room was enveloped in silence. Dylan looked like he was on the verge of exploding with rage, while Abigail appeared to shrink back, her earlier bravado dissipating. Dylan turned desperately to Mr. Jackson. We can contest this, right? There has to be a way. Mr. Jackson closed the folder with a definitive snap. You can try, but Marjorie was of sound mind when she made her decision. After the legal process concluded, I managed to finalize my divorce from Dylan. The house and the apartment he used for his escapades became mine legally. Dylan, along with his new family, wandered from one temporary home to another. Our mutual friends occasionally updated me on his struggles, but I found no joy in his misfortunes. Abigail, too, faced her share of difficulties. She had gambled on inheriting her mother's wealth and lost, leaving her buried in debt. One afternoon, she appeared on my doorstep, looking worn and defeated, a stark contrast to her usual confident demeanor. Emma, I need help, she said plainly, without any pretense. Recalling all the bitter exchanges and her scorn, I responded, I can't help you, Abigail. You've made your choices. Her eyes flickered with a blend of anger and desperation. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching us crumble. I shook my head, a pang of pity stirring within me despite everything. I don't take pleasure in your struggles, Abigail, but you need to resolve your issues yourself. In a bid to preserve the legacy of Mrs. Zoe, I decided to transform the old mansion into a boutique hotel named Marjorie's. This project was a tribute to Mrs. Zoe, aimed at keeping her spirit and passion for the estate alive by turning it into a vibrant hub of activity. I oversaw everything from renovations to marketing, infusing my efforts with dedication and attention to detail. One evening, as I sat in Mrs. Zoe's beloved garden, I contemplated the future. I envisioned Marjorie's not just as a hotel but as a cornerstone of the community, a place that would foster connections and host local events, becoming an integral part of the area's social fabric. My name is Charlotte. I grew up with my mother, Emily, in a modest apartment located on the fringes of our town. My father left when I was only 5 years old, leaving behind a dim memory and numerous unanswered questions. Despite this, my mom never spoke negatively about him, though the sadness in her eyes whenever his name was mentioned revealed more than words could. It was just the two of us, and she went to great lengths to provide for me, often working multiple shifts and over weekends. There were times when I'd return from school to find her asleep on the sofa, still in her work clothes, too tired to even reach her bed. Our life was simple and sometimes challenging, but it was woven through with love. Witnessing her sacrifices ignited a determination within me. I was resolved to succeed and make her proud. While others my age were out socializing, I was buried in my studies, determined to change our fortunes. My hard work paid off when I earned a scholarship to study economics at State College. The day I received the acceptance letter, my mom wept tears of joy. You did it, baby, she exclaimed, embracing me tightly. You're going to do great things. I just know it. College was a revelation. I was among peers who had led much more privileged lives, which was initially startling. However, I didn't let it discourage me. Instead, it fueled my ambition even more. I graduated with honors, with my mom's cheers being the loudest at the ceremony. The pride in her eyes was unmistakable. Our years of hard work and dedication were finally bearing fruit. After college, I secured a position as an economist with a reputable company in the city. As I prepared to move, my mom reminded me, "Call me every week, and don't forget to eat your vegetables." I laughed and hugged her, promising to make her proud. Life in the city was a whirlwind of hard work and determination as I sought to prove my capabilities. I often worked late into the night and started early the next day. My efforts didn't go unnoticed, and within 3 years, I received a significant promotion. "Holy Charlotte," my coworker Michael exclaimed when I shared the news. "We need to celebrate. Drinks on me tonight." That evening, at Michael's favorite bar, amidst the loud music and flowing drinks, I noticed a tall, dark-haired man with a captivating smile at the bar. Our eyes met, and soon he approached me. "I'm Liam Montclair," he introduced himself, and the night unfolded with lively conversation and laughter. We quickly became inseparable, and after 7 months, I was deeply in love. On a crisp autumn evening, everything changed when Liam Montclair proposed. The journey from a challenging childhood to moments of profound joy had shaped me into who I was, and as I looked forward to my future with Liam Montclair, I knew the trials and triumphs of my past had prepared me for this new chapter. We were in the park where Liam Montclair and I had shared our third date, surrounded by trees dressed in vibrant shades of red and gold. As he slipped the engagement ring onto my finger, a stunning diamond that must have cost a small fortune, I felt like the protagonist in a fairy tale. But little did I know, our story was about to veer in an unexpected direction. A week later, Liam Montclair mentioned it was time for me to meet his parents. "They're excited to meet you," he said, but there was a hint of unease in his smile. My suspicions grew as we pulled into the driveway of a sprawling mansion, complete with a manicured lawn and several luxury cars, a clear sign of old, serious money. "Your parents live here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Liam Montclair just nodded and led me to the front door, which swung open to reveal an older couple who looked as though they belonged in a high society magazine. "Charlotte, these are my parents, Jackson and Madison," Liam Montclair introduced. They greeted me with polite smiles that carried a hint of a French accent. Inside, the mansion was like a museum filled with antique furniture, priceless art, and numerous portraits of stern-faced men and women in elaborate, old-fashioned attire. "Our ancestors," Madison explained, pointing to a particularly dark picture of a man who was a count in the royal court. Dinner was announced, and we were led to a dining room that could have easily seated 18. I sat down, overwhelmed by the array of silverware in front of me. As the first course arrived, I hesitated, unsure which fork to use. Liam Montclair subtly pointed to the outermost one, and I followed his cue, feeling utterly out of place. Throughout the meal, I could feel Jackson's and Madison's eyes on me, their looks of barely concealed disdain. I had never felt so inadequate. As we progressed to the main course, Madison's piercing gaze locked onto me. "So, Charlotte," she began with saccharine sweetness, "tell us about your family. What do your parents do?" I swallowed hard, my cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I was raised by my mother. She's a waitress," I managed to say. "And your father's?" Jackson interjected, his eyebrow raised. He left when I was 3. "I don't remember him," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. The silence that followed was suffocating. Suddenly, Madison stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is unacceptable," she exclaimed, her accent thick with anger. "Liam Montclair, darling, you cannot be serious about this girl." "Mother, please," Liam Montclair started, but Madison cut him off. "We are from an ancient French family. We have a reputation to uphold. We cannot allow our only son to marry someone without pedigree or proper lineage," she declared. Jackson nodded in agreement. Indeed, We expect our son to marry an equal, someone who knows their lineage back to at least the 7th generation, he said coldly. I sat there, mouth agape, completely blindsided. I know my mom's parents' names, I started, but the words felt hollow against the weight of their expectations. As the evening unraveled, I realized the fairy tale engagement was being overshadowed by a harsh reality, one where love was measured not just by the heart, but by lineage and legacy. Yet beyond Jackson's dramatic display of rolling his eyes so vehemently I feared they might detach, it was clear he lacked any appreciation for heritage or respect for lineage. That's enough, Liam Montclair interjected, slicing through the thick tension. Charlotte is intelligent, kind, and diligent. I love her, and I intend to marry her. Your approval isn't necessary. His words filled me with warmth, but that feeling was quickly chilled by Madison's icy retort. Oh, you'll marry her, all right, she sneered, but only if she consents to our conditions. Weakly, I echoed. Jackson leaned in, his gaze piercing. If you are to join this family, you must adapt. You will follow our rules, learn our customs, and strive to uphold our societal status. Is that understood? I turned to Liam Montclair, seeking reassurance, and he nodded supportively. It's not as bad as it seems, Charlotte. They just want what's best for us. My head was reeling. This was not the engagement announcement I had envisioned. Yet, because of my love for Liam Montclair, I resolved to make it work. Reluctantly, I nodded. I understand. I'll do my best. Madison's smile was cold and unconvincing. Good. Start by familiarizing yourself with the history of our distinguished French ancestors. It's vital to appreciate your roots, she stated. I suppressed a response. My background was humble and nurtured by a devoted mother who had given her all for me. Instead of voicing this, I simply nodded again. The following weeks were a blur of relentless demands. My in-laws were not content with mere historical education. They decided I required a total transformation. Etiquette and style courses, Madison declared, thrusting a stack of brochures into my hands. You'll need these to blend in with our circle. Thus, in addition to my full-time job, I spent evenings and weekends learning to navigate 15 different types of forks, master the correct way to curtsy, and perform the complex steps of a waltz. Keep your back straight and chin up, the dance instructor commanded as I tripped through yet another sequence, striving to embody the grace expected of a lady in society. Returning home each night, physically sore and mentally burdened by endless rules and protocols, I'd confront my wedding planner, overwhelmed by the myriad tasks still pending. My phone buzzed, Mom, again. Taking a deep breath, I answered with feigned enthusiasm. Hey, Mom. Everything's great. The wedding plans are progressing smoothly. That's wonderful, sweetie. Her voice brimmed with pride. I can't wait to meet Liam Montclair and his family. Have you planned a dinner yet? Cringing at the memory of my recent discussion with Liam Montclair, where he dismissed the idea of meeting my mother before the wedding, I managed a strained, "Not yet, Mom. Everyone's just so busy, but soon, I promise." The next evening, at another awkward family dinner, I cautiously suggested, maybe we could all dine with my mother soon? She's eager to meet everyone. The ensuing silence was stifling until Madison scoffed, her laugh sharp and dismissive. And just how do you envision this gathering happening? Madison asked, her voice laden with scorn. Jackson, feigning patronizing patience as if lecturing a child, chimed in. Charlotte, surely you must understand, our social circles are quite different. We really aren't accustomed to mingling with a waitress. A wave of anger and shame washed over me, coloring my cheeks red. How could they diminish my mother so callously, as if her life's work held no value? She was worth more than any of them. I felt the urge to lash out, to defend her honor, but Liam Montclair's hand tightened over mine beneath the table. Let it go, he murmured quietly. Don't argue. It's not worth it. I clenched my jaw, biting down until I tasted blood, the injustice of it all gnawing at me. I loved Liam Montclair, yes, but at what cost? This felt all wrong. That night, as I lay restless and agitated, it struck me how much of myself I was sacrificing. With each stifled opinion, each compulsory etiquette class, and each lie to my mother, I was eroding pieces of the real Charlotte. Months of preparation culminated in our wedding day. Dressed in my bridal gown, I stared at a stranger in the mirror. The woman looking back was everything Madison and Jackson demanded: polished, composed, flawless. "You look beautiful, honey," my mom said, her eyes moist as she adjusted my veil. Pride filled her voice, but my stomach twisted in knots. "Thanks, Mom. I'm just nervous, I guess." She gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Everything will be fine," she soothed, oblivious to the reality of the situation. The ceremony passed in a whirl, faces blurring together. Liam Montclair's side of the venue overflowed with the city's elite: judges, politicians, CEOs. While my side seemed meager, composed only of my mom and a few college friends. As the reception began, I quickly realized this was not the joyous celebration I had envisioned. Madison and Jackson reveled in the limelight, surrounded by their illustrious guests, and I, it seemed, was relegated to the role of server. "Charlotte, darling," Madison cooed, her voice dripping with faux sweetness, "be a dear and fetch us some champagne and those little crab cakes." Frozen in shock, I couldn't believe this was happening on my wedding day. The tasks didn't stop. I spent the next hour darting between tables, serving drinks and snacks, trying not to trip in my gown. The whispers and sneers of Liam Montclair's family followed me, making each step heavier than the last. By the time I returned to my seat, I was nearly in tears, and Liam Montclair was absent, likely mingling with guests. I reassured myself, hoping things would improve post-ceremony. "They'll have to start treating me as family," I thought. But then Madison's voice, loud and clear, cut through the reception din. "Charlotte," she announced, ensuring the room heard, "as the new Delroy daughter-in-law, it is your duty to serve our table for the evening. After all, we have the most important guests here." Something within me snapped. Months of suppressed frustration and humiliation surged forward. "No," I declared, my voice firm despite its shake. "I will not. It's my wedding day. And there are waiters for that," I retorted, my voice echoing in the sudden silence that gripped the room. Madison's face twisted into a mask of fury. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice seething with contempt. "You will do as you're told and remember your place, you ungrateful upstart. You have no right to defy me, a woman of distinguished lineage." Rage and humiliation battled within me as I turned away to find Liam Montclair. I spotted him at the bar, laughing jovially with a circle of his college friends, a champagne flute dangling from his hand. "Liam Montclair," I hissed, grabbing his arm firmly. "We need to talk. Now." He looked at me, his eyes clouded. "What's wrong, babe? Can it wait? I'm right in the middle of something here." I dragged him aside to a quieter corner, my hands trembling. "Your mother is treating me like a servant at our wedding, and here you are, laughing and drinking as if nothing is wrong." Liam Montclair's expression darkened with irritation. "Are you serious right now? You're bothering me over this triviality." I stared at him, disbelief etching my features. "Triviality? Liam Montclair, they're humiliating me in front of everyone." He rolled his eyes, swaying slightly. "Oh, come on, just do what they ask. It's not a big deal. You should be grateful they're even letting you into the family." "Grateful?" I echoed, my voice tinged with disbelief. "Yeah, grateful," he smirked, his arrogance clear. "You think I didn't have other options? Prettier, richer girls from good families? I chose you, Charlotte. The least you could do is try to fit in." His words struck me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, feeling the ground shift beneath me. The man before me was not the Liam Montclair I thought I knew, not the man I had agreed to marry. "It's almost time for the ceremony," he said, checking his watch dismissively. "Pull yourself together, and let's get this over with." As he walked away, I stood frozen, tears welling in my eyes, threatening to spill. Everything was so wrong. "Charlotte," my mom's voice cut through my turmoil. "Honey, what's wrong?" I turned to her, the concern in her eyes unleashing my tears. She enveloped me in a hug. "Oh, sweetie," she murmured, stroking my hair. "Talk to me. What's going on?" Between sobs, I told her everything. The degradation, Liam Montclair's cruel words, the months of trying to reshape myself to fit into a world that clearly didn't want me. Mom listened intently, her expression growing grimmer with each word. When I finished, she held me at arm's length, her gaze piercing. "Charlotte," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "do you truly love Liam Montclair? Do you want to marry him?" 7 months ago, I would have answered without hesitation. But now, I shook my head slowly, a painful clarity dawning on me. "No," I whispered. "No, I don't." Mom nodded, her expression resolute. "Then let's end this charade." Before I could respond, she strode to the DJ's booth and seized the microphone. The feedback screeched, drawing everyone's eyes to her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and commanding, "I apologize for this interruption, but there is an important announcement to make, a little truth that needs airing." Her gaze locked onto Madison and Jackson, who sat frozen, champagne flutes halted midair. The room fell eerily silent, the tension palpable. "Madison, Jackson," Mom continued, her voice echoing across the quiet room, or should I say, Madison and Jackson? Madison's face drained of color, a stark contrast to the confident sneer she had worn moments before. As Jackson's face turned a vivid shade of red, Madison stammered, her usually flawless French accent faltering. My mom's laugh, sharp and unforgiving, cut through the tense air. "Oh, come on, Madison. Don't you recognize an old classmate? Emily Thompson, from good old Brookfield High, class of '80. Whispers and murmurs swept through the assembled crowd as the revelation settled. "That's right, everyone," Mom continued, gaining momentum. "Your esteemed hosts tonight, the supposedly noble Montclair, are about as French as apple pie. Madison here was just another classmate in our quaint little town, and Jackson was the boy from the wrong side of the tracks next door." I watched, fascinated, as Madison and Jackson seemed to deflate in their seats, their carefully curated personas unraveling before everyone's eyes. I knew it was them as soon as I heard their voices, Mom revealed with a wink directed at me. "Though I must admit, that French accent is a new twist. Picked that up after we all moved to the city, aiming to make it big." "Huh?" She paused, letting the reality of her words sink in. "Funny, isn't it? I stayed true to myself, remained just an ordinary woman. But Madison and Jackson here? They reinvented themselves as French nobility." Laughter and shocked whispers spread through the room as the guests digested the truth about the Montclairs' fabricated elegance. "And you know what the kicker is?" Mom's voice sliced through the murmuring. "These people, who invented their entire past, who lied about their origins to climb the social ladder, they dared to look down on my daughter, to treat her like she's beneath them." Turning to face the crowd, her eyes ablaze with indignation, she declared, "There's nothing noble about lying, nothing elite about treating people like dirt. The only thing beneath anyone here is the behavior of those who pretend they're better than the rest of us." A heavy silence followed her words. Slowly, the guests began to turn towards Madison and Jackson, their earlier looks of admiration now replaced by contempt and disgust. Caught in their lies, Madison and Jackson fumbled for explanations, their faux French accents crumbling into their true Midwestern twangs. "It's not what you think," Madison pleaded, her voice stripped of its earlier pretense. "We just wanted to give our son a better life," Jackson added in desperation, his accent revealing more of his humble beginnings than any chateau fantasy. "You don't understand the pressures of high society." Their pleas fell on deaf ears as the guests, many of whom had revered the Montclair for years, turned away in disdain. Amidst the uproar, Liam Montclair stormed up to me, fury contorting his features. "You," he spat, pointing at me accusingly. "You've ruined everything, my life, my family's reputation. It's all destroyed because of you." I looked at him, the man I thought I loved, and felt nothing but relief. No pain, no regret, just a profound release from the farce. Taking a deep breath, I faced the chaotic reception hall. Everyone, May I have your attention, please? My voice, clear and resonant, hushed the crowd. I have an important announcement to make. There will be no wedding today. Gasps and murmurs cascaded through the crowd, the ripple of shock palpable as everyone processed the sudden turn of events. I continued, despite the rising emotions around me. I've come to realize that I made a mistake. I chose someone who was embarrassed by my background and expected me to alter every aspect of myself to fit into his world. I regret that I nearly married someone so superficial and deceitful. With those words, I reached up, removed my veil, and let it drop gracefully to the floor. Looking over at my mom, whose face radiated pride, I nodded. Let's go home, Mom. The fallout from that day was rapid and devastating for the Montclair. Once celebrated pillars of high society, they became pariahs overnight. Their connections deserted them, invitations ceased, and their fair-weather friends acted as if they had never known them. The last I heard, they were forced to sell their grand mansion and relocate to another city, hoping to escape the repercussions of their exposed falsehoods. As for me, life unfolded in unexpectedly wonderful ways. Just a few months after the canceled wedding, I met Lucas. He's a teacher at a local high school and comes from a working-class background much like my own. On our first date, I shared the entire ordeal with the Montclair. Far from being deterred, he laughed and said, "Sounds like you dodged a bullet there. We've been together since, taking things slowly." His family, grounded and genuine, welcomed me with no prerequisites, no etiquette classes, no extensive family histories to memorize, just real warmth and acceptance. I returned to my previous job, where I was valued for my hard work and integrity. My mom and I have grown even closer. She's not just my mother, but my hero and my rock. I make sure she knows how much I appreciate her every single day. Life, it seems, has a funny way of writing itself when you stay true to who you are. I am Samira, and for as long as I can remember, responsibility has been my steadfast companion. Our humble abode was always a hive of activity, filled with the laughter and chaos of my two younger brothers. It intensified with the arrival of my baby sister when I was just 9. "Samira, dear, could you help with Elizabeth's diaper?" my mom would call out, her voice weary from working long double shifts. Dropping whatever task I was engaged in, I would dash to assist. This was our norm. Everyone contributed, everyone except Elizabeth. From the outset, Elizabeth was the exception. "She's just a baby, let her be," my dad would insist, dismissing any concerns about her behavior. I observed my parents exhausting themselves daily, dad at construction sites and mom cleaning homes, to ensure we had enough to eat and could dare to dream. Caught in the middle were my brothers, Jackson and Ryan, often overshadowed by my responsibilities and Elizabeth's exemptions. At dinner, knowing glances were exchanged whenever Elizabeth's tantrums were rewarded yet again. Post-high school, I was determined to escape the relentless cycle of scraping by. My job at the local diner wasn't glamorous, but it marked a beginning. Every dime I made was stashed away in my college fund jar, hidden in my closet. At night, I'd count my savings, dreaming of the day I could enroll at the community college. My dedication didn't go unnoticed, and soon I was promoted from waitressing to managing the diner's finances. College no longer seemed an unattainable goal. I enrolled in evening classes, balancing work and studies with an unanticipated fervor. The fatigue was palpable. Many nights I fell asleep on my textbooks, only to rise at dawn for another workday. Observing Elizabeth's carefree life, sleeping till noon, skipping school, facing no repercussions, only spurred my determination to succeed. "You're going to burn yourself out," my dad cautioned one night, finding me studying past midnight. Smiling, I responded, "Maybe, Dad, but I'm going somewhere. I promise you that." My hard work paid off. I earned my college degree, which opened doors I had only dreamed of. Hired as a junior analyst at First National Bank, I poured the same tenacity into my job as I did into my studies. Within months, my supervisor commended my rapid progress, hinting at a bright future. Perhaps my knack for numbers and navigating office politics were skills honed from years of managing family dynamics. Meanwhile, Jackson and Ryan moved out, carving their paths, while Elizabeth continued her carefree existence at home. Calls from Mom about Elizabeth's escapades were frequent: late nights, transient boyfriends, faltering grades. I listened, but detachedly. That chapter of my life was behind me. I had my apartment, my career, my aspirations. Then, a call one morning disrupted everything. Elizabeth's pregnant, and the father has left for Nevada, US, and wants nothing to do with the baby, Mom revealed, her voice tense. Clutching the phone tighter, I realized how far I'd come and how much had yet to change back home. Of course, they would help her with the baby. Elizabeth was still their precious little girl, now 17 and expecting a child of her own. I remained silent on the phone, already bracing for what I knew was coming next. "You'll help too, won't you, Samira? Come over on weekends. You're so good with children." That was the moment I began crafting a repertoire of excuses: urgent work projects, professional development courses, client meetings, anything to preserve my much-needed free time instead of caring for another child. "I don't understand you anymore," my mom lamented during a particularly tense conversation. "You used to be so helpful." "I used to be a child who had no choice but to help," I retorted. "Now, I'm an adult, with my own life." "But doesn't family work both ways, Mom? Or have you forgotten the checks I send every month that usually silence them, at least for a while?" The checks I wrote covered substantial expenses: Elizabeth's prenatal care, baby supplies, and ongoing costs. But no amount of money seemed to earn their approval. Over coffee one day, my Aunt Anna hinted at the family's whispers. "They're calling you heartless behind your back, saying you've changed, become cold." I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl in the dark liquid. "Let them talk. They've never really understood me anyway." "You're seen as ungrateful," she continued, pressing the point. "Ungrateful? For the privilege of raising their other children? For the chance to now raise their grandchild? I've earned everything I have, Aunt Anna. Everything." That week, my promotion to senior analyst was confirmed, which bumped up my salary again. The increased checks I sent home spoke for themselves, but my boundaries remained firm. No weekend babysitting, no emergency childcare, no last-minute favors. Let them call me whatever they liked. I had spent enough of my life playing the responsible one. Between client meetings and financial reports, romance was hardly a priority, and my dating app was mostly unused until one rainy Tuesday night when Arthur messaged me. His profile was different. No boastful gym selfies, just a genuine smile. "I notice you work in finance," his message read. "I'm an investment advisor. Maybe we could bore each other with market talk over coffees." That coffee led to dinner, which blossomed into weekends together, evolving into 3 years of the kind of relationship I never thought I'd have time for. Arthur was patient and humorous, always managing to make me laugh, even after the longest days. "You know," he mentioned during a stroll in the park, "I never thought I'd find someone who gets both compound interest and my terrible jokes." Then came the proposal, simple and sweet, in my apartment over a home-cooked meal. "I can't imagine my life without you," he said, presenting the ring. I said yes before he could finish his question. Introducing Arthur to my family went smoother than expected. Even Elizabeth was on her best behavior, which felt like a minor miracle. "He's wonderful, Samira," my mom gushed after our first family dinner. "And did you see how great he is with Nathan?" She referred to Elizabeth's son, my nephew, who indeed took an instant liking to Arthur. The wedding was beautiful, and married life with Arthur started perfectly. He meshed with the family as if he'd always been a part of it, playing with Nathan for hours, seamlessly integrating into our complex dynamics. During our family visits, Arthur would teach Nathan how to throw a ball or build with blocks. Elizabeth watched these moments with a strange intensity that I didn't fully grasp at the time. "He's going to be such an amazing father," she'd remark, her smile loaded with meaning as she glanced my way. You're so lucky, Samira. That's when the probing began, initially from my family, and then from Arthur himself. Don't you think it's time? He'd ask, observing Nathan scamper around our living room. We're not getting any younger, he'd add. I'd lay out my thoughts repeatedly. We need to be completely ready. We need our own house, not this cramped apartment. We need a solid financial cushion. But we're both in stable jobs. We're doing well financially, he'd counter. What are we waiting for? The right moment, I'd insist. We agreed, one child when we're fully prepared. He'd sigh and let the subject drop, yet I could sense his disappointment. At family events, I'd catch him gazing longingly at Nathan. Your sister manages just fine, he'd occasionally remark, a hint of frustration in his voice. My sister lives off our parents and dips into their retirement savings, I'd reply firmly. That's not the life I want for our future child. The tension between us built slowly, almost imperceptibly, like storm clouds gathering on a bright day. You know the rain is inevitable, yet you convince yourself it's still distant. I was absorbed in climbing the next rung of my career ladder, in growing our house fund, in the meticulously planned 4-year plan. Then one Saturday, as I was spring cleaning, which inevitably meant sorting through the perennial mess on Arthur's side of the closet, I found something unsettling, a phone hidden behind his winter sweaters. It wasn't his work phone, nor his personal phone, and it was unlocked. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages. The first one hit me hard, from Elizabeth, miss you already. Can't wait till Saturday. The messages, photos, and discussions that followed were a blur of betrayal, mocking me and my career, celebrating their deceit. The timestamps revealed a months-long affair. Then one message stopped everything. Baby's yours. The doctor confirmed today. 10 weeks. I don't remember how I got to my parents' house. I was a whirlwind of shock and rage, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Elizabeth was there, casually watching Saturday morning cartoons with Nathan. I slammed the phone on the coffee table, shattering the calm. Nathan was startled, and Mom quickly ushered him out. Elizabeth, unfazed, picked up the phone and scrolled through it nonchalantly. Oh, well. I guess you know now. You're sleeping with my husband, I exclaimed. She shrugged, dismissively. We're in love, Samira. These things happen. And now, with a baby coming, Arthur and I plan to get married once you stop being difficult. Difficult? I was incredulous. I'm being difficult? Well, yes, she said, as if explaining something simple. You never really wanted children anyway. You're too caught up in your career. Arthur needs a real family. I turned to my parents, desperate for them to intervene, to denounce this betrayal. But instead, my mom sat beside Elizabeth, comforting her. Samira, try to be reasonable. Nathan needs a father figure, and Arthur is so good with him. The realization that I was standing alone against what was now my entire family was crushing. As the reality of another baby coming settled in, my voice faltered. My husband and sister are having an affair, and you expect me to be reasonable? I choked out. Dad cleared his throat uneasily. Well, you never really wanted children, honey, and Arthur. He's always wanted to be a father. Maybe this is for the best. When was the last time you cooked him dinner? Elizabeth. She'd make a good wife. I stared in disbelief at my family, all aligned against me, defending the indefensible. There was Elizabeth, visibly pregnant with my husband's child, while Mom was already fantasizing about another wedding. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes, but his stance was clear. A proper wife. I echoed, my voice hollow. Like your precious Elizabeth, who depends on you and betrays her sister? Elizabeth rolled her eyes dismissively. Don't be so dramatic, Samira. Just go back to your big office and your important meetings. Leave the family stuff to people who care about it. I barely recall the drive back from my parents' house. The world seemed surreal, as though I was observing someone else's life crumbling, not my own. When I entered our home, Arthur was in the living room, acting as if it was just another normal Saturday. Hey, honey, he greeted, moving to hug me with that familiar, now sickening smile. I stepped back, holding up the secret phone I had found. Want to explain this? His expression shifted from confusion to recognition, then to fear. "Where did you find that?" he stammered, clearly flustered. "In our closet while cleaning." "You really should find better hiding spots for your affair phones," I retorted. "Samira, I can explain the messages. The photos? Or maybe how you got my sister pregnant," I demanded. He initially tried to deny it, as they often do. "It's not. I didn't." But seeing the resolve in my face, he dropped the act. "Fine, yes, Elizabeth and I are together," he snapped. "What did you expect? You're never home. All you care about is work. When was the last time we had a real conversation about starting a family? So, this is my fault? You cheated because I wanted financial security before having kids." I shot back. "You never wanted kids, not really. You always had an excuse. The house, the savings, the right time. Elizabeth wants a family. She gets what's important in life." I looked at him, this stranger with my husband's face, and felt nothing but revulsion. What's important in life is loyalty, honor, basic human decency. But I guess those aren't important to you, or my sister. "Don't act all high and mighty," he retorted. "You're just angry because Elizabeth's giving me what you wouldn't." The divorce papers were filed the next day. Having proof of the affair made the process swift. My brothers, Jackson and Ryan, came to help me move out. They were the only family members who stood by me. "Elizabeth was always spoiled," Jackson remarked as we packed. "But this is a new low." Ryan, unable to even utter her name, declared, "They're dead to me, both of them." Through my brothers, I inadvertently kept abreast of updates I'd rather avoid. Arthur and Elizabeth had a quiet wedding, attended by my beaming parents. Elizabeth gave birth to a girl. Despite everything, life moved on, but without them in mind. They settled into a modest house in the suburbs. Nathan began calling Arthur Dad. Mom kept urging us to visit, clinging to the idea that we needed to be a family again. Jackson shared this with me during one of our monthly dinners. "She says we need to be a family again," he relayed. "We are a family," Ryan responded, raising his glass. "The three of us. That's enough." I nodded, thankful for the loyalty of my brothers in a world where fidelity seemed scarce. We alone recognize that some betrayals are irreparable, some bridges permanently burned, and sometimes families are healthier apart. Years of change have shaped new lives for all of us. My new apartment was a loft with a view of the city skyline, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, and ample space to showcase the art collection I had always dreamed of. The Mercedes parked in my reserved spot shone under the garage lights. I had achieved everything as planned. My brothers frequently visited, sharing snippets of news. Elizabeth and Arthur were floundering, having moved 4 times in 3 years, each home smaller than the last. But their struggles were no longer my concern. Then, on a Tuesday evening, a familiar number illuminated my phone screen. "Samira," Arthur's voice came through, aged yet recognizable, tightening my stomach. "Please don't hang up." I should have, but instead I listened. "We need your help," he said as if he had any right to ask. "Elizabeth had an accident, a compound fracture. She's had surgery, can't move, can't care for the kids, and she's pregnant again." I sat, phone pressed to my ear, wondering if this was some cruel joke. "The kids need someone to pick them up from school, to watch them until I get home. Nathan's struggling to manage, and with the new baby." "You thought what?" My voice was eerily calm. "That I would help? They're your nephews, Samira. Your family. Elizabeth can't even get to the bathroom by herself." "My family?" I repeated. "The sister who betrayed me with my husband? That's my family?" "Don't be like that," he snapped, his tone now accusatory. "This isn't about us. It's about innocent children who need help. Are you too selfish to care?" "Too selfish?" I scoffed. "That's rich. Coming from you? We're struggling here." His voice rose. "Do you know how hard it is keeping up with the expenses of children? I'm working overtime just to keep food on the table. We can't even afford a decent place to live. Meanwhile, you're living it up in your luxury condo with your fancy car." "So, this is about money?" I countered sharply. "Not all of us can just focus on our careers," he retorted bitterly. Some of us have real responsibilities. Must be nice, having the family you stole and no way to support them, I replied coldly. Sounds like a real dream come true. The kids need parents who didn't build their lives on betrayal. Goodbye, Arthur. I hung up mid-protest and blocked his number before he could call again. My mother's number flashing on my phone was almost as unwelcome. I answered anyway, out of some lingering habit. Samira, Mom began with that tone she used when she wanted something. We need to talk about Elizabeth. She needs help. Arthur called you, didn't he? As I paced my living room, my mother's voice came through the phone, strained and pleading. He told you about her leg, didn't he? Yes, he did, and I told him what I'm telling you. Not my problem. How can you be so cold? She's your sister, and she's struggling with 3 kids, soon to be 4. The sister who slept with my husband? That sister? I replied, my voice icy. Mom sighed heavily. That was years ago, Samira. You need to move past it. We're family. Funny how family only matters when you need something from me, I countered. Her silence was telling. We've helped her as much as we can, Mom's voice cracked, but she keeps asking for more. Money for the kids, the rent, everything. We've gone through all our savings. Your father and we can't keep this up. I couldn't suppress a bitter laugh. So, the golden child is finally becoming too expensive to maintain? Don't be cruel. She's never learned to. Mom's voice faltered. To what? Work? Support herself? Take responsibility for her actions? Gee, I wonder why that is. She just keeps having babies, Mom blurted out, frustration seeping through. She won't look for a job, says she's too busy with the children, but she's always asking for money. Always needing something. Sounds exactly like the person you raised her to be, I said coldly. The princess who never had to face consequences. You have no right to speak to me like that. Mom's voice rose sharply. I am your mother. And whose fault is it that Elizabeth turned out this way? Who taught her that she never had to work for anything, that someone would always bail her out? We did our best, no. You did your easiest. And now you're calling me because the monster you created is too expensive to feed. You have a duty to help your family. Mom was shouting now. After everything we've done for you? I interrupted. You mean like supporting my sister when she had an affair with my husband? Or like calling me selfish for wanting financial security before having children? I don't owe you anything. I hung up before she could respond, my hand shaking with the force of years of pent-up frustration. The view from my apartment suddenly seemed like the sweetest revenge. My life, built exactly as I'd planned it, without their help or their approval. Later that evening, while I was reviewing quarterly reports, Jackson called. You'll never guess who tried calling me today. Elizabeth, I guessed, already aware that the desperation tour was making its rounds. Bingo. Wanted me to help with the kids. Maybe loan them some money until they get back on their feet, he snorted. As if they were ever on their feet to begin with. What did you tell her? The same thing Ryan told her yesterday. Some betrayals can't be undone. What she did to you wasn't just cheating, it was destroying a family. She started crying, saying we were being cruel, that family should help family. He paused. I reminded her she didn't seem too concerned about family when she was sleeping with your husband.
How did she take that?
About as well as you'd expect. Started screaming about how we're all against her, how nobody understands how hard her life is. He chuckled darkly. Guess karma finally caught up with her. 3 weeks later, Ryan brought the news I'd been expecting. They had moved in with Mom and Dad. Elizabeth, Arthur, the kids, all under one roof. The family saga continued, just without me. With a new baby on the way, Dad is turning his workshop into an extra bedroom. Mom and Dad, who are looking forward to a tranquil retirement, are now on full-time babysitting and financial support duty. While Elizabeth recuperates, Mom keeps an eye on the kids, mostly just scrolling through her phone all day. Dad is even tapping into his pension to help cover their expenses. Yesterday, Mom dropped by my place. She seemed worried and asked if I could help them out since they were feeling overwhelmed. I wasn't surprised to hear this. The following day, she showed up unannounced at my door. I hardly recognized her. She seemed visibly older and exhausted beyond just the physical. Before I could respond to her plea, I stopped her. "Listen, you've made your decisions," I told her firmly. "You chose to indulge Elizabeth even when she hurt me. You allowed them to move in. These were your choices. Now you have to live with them. If you show up here again, I will call the police. Are we clear?" She tried to speak, but I didn't let her continue. "Remember, this is the bed you made," I added, and then I shut the door on her, blocking her number, the last family contact, except for my brothers. That evening, I had dinner with Marcus, whom I'd been seeing for a few months. He knows all about the family troubles and has always been supportive without pressing me. After I shared the latest happenings, he reached out and held my hand, reminding me that family isn't just about blood relations. Sometimes, it's about the people you choose. I felt reassured as I thought of my supportive brothers and Marcus. I mentioned to Marcus that my brothers were visiting over the weekend and invited him to join. His smile was all the confirmation I needed. For the first time in a while, I felt genuinely content with where I was and the choices I'd made. The chaos at my parents' house was no longer my burden. I was focused on living my life, building my own family, and safeguarding my happiness. My name is Chloe, and at 35, I pride myself on being meticulous and organized. As an auditor for a large company, my keen eye for details serves me well, both professionally and personally. My friends often tease me about my enthusiasm for the organization, especially when it comes to financial matters like saving receipts and timely tax payments. But for me, these habits are essential for maintaining order in my life. Now, let me share the story of how I met my husband, Theodore. It was at a gathering hosted by our mutual friend, Victoria. That evening, as I enjoyed some wine and conversation with college friends, Theodore arrived. He was slightly older, exuding confidence and sporting a charismatic smile. He worked as a manager at a food sales company. "Hey, I'm Theodore. Do you mind if I join you?" he asked, beer in hand and eyes meeting mine. "Sure, I'm Chloe. Nice to meet you," I responded with a smile. We hit it off immediately, finding common ground in our love for hiking and classic rock. A few months into our relationship, Theodore invited me to a barbecue at his sister Audrey's place. It was my first time meeting his family, and although Audrey welcomed us warmly, her kids were quite the handful, running around, screaming and tossing toys. Despite my discomfort with the chaos, Theodore seemed unbothered, amused by their energy. As our relationship deepened, Theodore proposed during a picturesque hike. It was a simple yet perfect moment atop a hill with a stunning valley view. Our wedding followed, beautiful but not without its challenges, particularly Audrey's kids, who were as unruly as ever. Theodore found their antics amusing, while I struggled with my frustration quietly. After marrying, Theodore and I decided it was time to buy our own home, moving from our rented apartment. One evening, we sat down to discuss our finances, eager to start this exciting new chapter together. With our combined love for organization and adventure, I felt hopeful about our future, despite the occasional challenges his family might bring. As Theodore and I settled into the reality of buying a new home together, we found ourselves navigating the practical aspects of merging our lives more fully. "Chloe, we need to figure out how to divide the expenses," Theodore said one evening, reclining on the couch in our current place. "Yeah, I've been thinking about that too," I replied thoughtfully. "I can take care of purchasing the furniture, appliances, and a few art pieces to decorate. What about you?" Theodore, ever the surprise giver, had a different kind of proposal. "How about I buy you a new car? I know your old one has been a hassle," he offered, with a considerate smile. The idea delighted me. My car was on its last legs, and the thought of a reliable replacement was more than welcome. We jumped into house hunting with enthusiasm and, after several weeks, fell in love with a charming, albeit slightly expensive, house. We decided it was worth the investment. Moving in was chaotic, but decorating our new space was an exciting endeavor for me. I dedicated many hours to selecting stylish, high-quality furniture and appliances. Not long after settling in, Theodore surprised me with a sleek, shiny new sedan. "Theodore, this is incredible." "Thank you so much," I exclaimed, overwhelmed with gratitude as I hugged him. Life in our new home started wonderfully. We both thrived in our jobs and cherished our time in the cozy environment we had created. However, not everything was perfect. Theodore's laid-back attitude, which I had once found endearing, began to irritate me, especially regarding household responsibilities. One evening, after a long day, I asked him to help with the dishes. Chloe, I had a rough day." "Can it wait until tomorrow?" he responded, his eyes pleading for leniency. But I insisted on maintaining our home's cleanliness, and reluctantly, he agreed to help. A few months into our marriage, I began to worry about not being able to get pregnant. It was an added stressor, and despite the doctors advising patience, it was hard not to feel anxious. To complicate matters, Theodore's sister, Audrey, who lived in a neighboring state, visited often, bringing chaos with her. Whenever she was over, she would unload her marital problems on me nonstop. "Chloe, you won't believe what David did this time," she would start, her frustration palpable. I tried to change the subject, hoping for a break from the constant drama, but Audrey insisted on venting. Her kids were just as disruptive. Their visits turned our home into a circus, running around, fighting, and being generally loud. After a tough work week, all I wanted was some peace, but that seemed impossible with the chaos they brought. "Guys, please calm down," I would plead, trying to restore some order. "Why are you always so uptight, Chloe?" Audrey would snap back, adding to the tension. Amid these challenges, Theodore and I continued to navigate our life together, balancing the joys of our new home with the complexities of family dynamics and personal hopes. Despite the occasional strains, our foundation was strong, built on love, shared dreams, and an ever-deepening commitment to each other. Each time I tried to get Audrey's children to behave, I would plead, "They're making a mess, Audrey. I just cleaned the house." But my patience was thinning. One day, when I expressed my frustration, Audrey retorted sharply, "Well, maybe if you had your kids, you'd understand." Her words struck me deeply, not only because they were harsh, but because she knew of my struggles with fertility. It felt like a direct attack, and I was astounded that Theodore stood by silently. "Theodore, are you going to let her speak to me like this?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. To my dismay, Theodore dismissed my concerns. "Chloe, calm down. You're making a big deal out of nothing," he said, taking Audrey's side again. "It's not nothing. She insulted me in our home," I exclaimed, tears starting to form. I was at my breaking point, tired of being disrespected in my own home and having my husband continually side with his sister.
I knew something needed to change.
On Saturday, Audrey arrived unexpectedly with her kids in tow, declaring she needed a break and was going shopping. "Fine, Audrey, but make it quick," I said, the stress evident in my tone. She thanked me and rushed out, leaving me with the kids and a growing sense of dread. I was in the kitchen trying to prepare dinner, a task I prefer to do meticulously, but with the kids causing chaos, concentrating was impossible. They were yelling, running around, and generally wreaking havoc. "Can you guys keep it down?" I called out from the kitchen, hoping for a moment of peace. They ignored me, and soon after, a loud crash from the living room sent me racing in. There, amidst the debris, lay my grandfather's shattered antique Chinese vase. My heart sank as I surveyed the damage. "What the hell happened here?" I demanded, my voice shaking as I looked at the kids who now stood still, guilt written all over their faces. "We were just playing," one mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "This vase is priceless. It belonged to my grandfather. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I was livid, my whole body trembling with anger. Just then, Theodore walked in, his demeanor calm and clueless.
"What's going on?" he asked.
I pointed to the shattered vase. "Your nephews just broke my grandfather's vase. Look at this mess." Theodore's response only inflamed the situation. "Calm down, Chloe. It's just a vase." We can get it fixed, he said, dismissing my feelings. It's not just about the vase, Theodore. It's about respect. I'm tired of this. Every time Audrey comes over, our house turns into a disaster zone, and you don't seem to care, I shouted, my voice cracking with frustration. Audrey walked in at that moment, shopping bags in hand, and looked annoyed by the commotion. What's all this yelling about? She asked. I pointed to the remnants of the vase on the floor. Your kids broke my grandfather's vase, Audrey. Look at this mess. Instead of apologizing, she retorted, well, maybe you should have kept a better eye on them, Chloe. Are you kidding me? They're your children, Audrey. I shouldn't have to watch them, I replied, my anger peaking. Theodore just shook his head, looking annoyed. You're overreacting, Chloe. Just drop it, he said. I was fed up. Overreacting? I've had enough of this. I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter in my own home, I said, finally standing up for myself, determined to make a change. The disrespect had become too much to bear, and I knew that for the sake of my dignity and happiness, something had to give. Tears spilled over as I shouted, with Theodore just standing there, silent and impassive, while Audrey had a smirk that seemed to declare a victory. Overwhelmed by a mix of anger, hurt, and betrayal, I stormed out of the room. Dealing with the chaos of Audrey and her kids' visits had been exhausting for months, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. One morning, as Theodore sat casually munching on his toast at the kitchen table, he dropped a bombshell as nonchalantly as if he was commenting on the weather. Chloe, I need to tell you something. Audrey's getting divorced and she's moving in with us with the kids for a few months, he said. I nearly dropped my coffee. Are you serious? Our house is already a madhouse when they visit for a day. How are we supposed to handle them living here for months? I questioned in disbelief. She's my sister, Chloe. She needs our help. You need to be more understanding, he replied, his look suggesting that I was being unreasonable. Understanding? I had been nothing but accommodating, but this was too much. Why can't we rent a place for her nearby? I'll even pay for the first month's rent, I suggested, trying to maintain my composure. No, she'll be better off here. Plus, you can help with the kids and keep things clean, he stated as if it were the most obvious solution. I'm not a babysitter, Theodore. I work too, and I need to relax when I get home. I argued, my frustration mounting. Stop being so selfish, Chloe. It's family, they need us, he countered, his tone growing sharper. I'm not being selfish, Theodore. I'm just asking for a reasonable solution. I'm not going to let my life be turned upside down, I retorted, feeling my anger rise. Well, they're coming tomorrow evening, so you better get used to the idea, he declared, standing up and leaving the kitchen. I was blindsided and felt utterly betrayed. The next morning, still fuming from our argument, I dressed for work and went to grab my car keys, but they were nowhere to be found. When I called Theodore, his voice was unnervingly calm. I took the car. It's mine, remember? I'm giving it to Audrey so she can use it for the kids, he informed me. You're giving my car to Audrey? Are you serious right now? I was stunned. It's not your car, Chloe. I paid for it, and she needs it more than you do, he replied, matter-of-factly. That was the last straw. Theodore, you've taken everything from me, and I'm done, I said, my voice shaking with anger. What are you talking about? Don't be dramatic, Chloe, he dismissed, clearly not grasping the depth of my feelings. Standing in the hallway, holding my phone, it felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. How had things gotten so bad? Determined, I called a moving company. Hi, I need a team to move some furniture and appliances today. It's urgent, I requested. The movers arrived a few hours later, and I directed them around the house, pointing out the items to be moved. Take everything, beds, sofas, chandeliers, even the faucets in the bathroom. As the house began to empty, a strange sense of relief washed over me. Watching each piece being carried out, I directed the movers to my mother's house, ready to start anew, free from the turmoil that had taken over my life. With the house now emptied, I gave the movers a tip, thanking them for their prompt work. I gathered my essentials and headed to my mom's place. Within a few hours, my phone started buzzing incessantly, It was Theodore calling, but I ignored the calls, feeling a mix of anxiety and newfound empowerment. That evening, there was a loud knock at my mom's door. I opened it to find Theodore standing there, his expression furious. "What the hell, Chloe? What did you do?" he yelled as he barged into the living room. "I took my belongings, Theodore." "You took the car, so I took what I bought," I replied, maintaining my composure. "This is insane. You stripped the house bare. Where are Audrey and the kids supposed to sleep?" he shouted, his face flushed with anger. "That's your problem, Theodore. You made this mess. Now you deal with it," I retorted, my arms crossed. "You're a thief, Chloe. You stole everything," he accused, gesticulating wildly. "I didn't steal anything. Here are the receipts," I said calmly, pulling out a folder and showing him proof of purchase for all the furniture and appliances. He flipped through the receipts, his anger turning to frustration. "Fine, Chloe. If this is how you want to play it, I'll file for divorce," he declared. I took a deep breath and handed him a stack of papers. "Already done. Here are the divorce papers. Sign them, and we're done," I stated. He looked at the papers, his face turning pale. "You're really serious about this, aren't you?" "Dead serious, Theodore. I deserve better than this," I affirmed, feeling an unusual sense of calm wash over me. He took a pen from his pocket, signed the papers without another word, and handed them back to me. "Fine, Chloe. Have it your way." I watched as he turned and walked out of my mom's house, the door slamming behind him. I stood there for a moment, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. It was over, and deep down, I knew it was the right decision. That night, I sat down with my mom and recounted everything that had happened. She was incredibly supportive and agreed that I had made the right choice. "Chloe, you've been through a lot. It's time you focused on yourself and your happiness," she said, giving me a comforting hug.
Thanks, Mom.
"I just need some time to figure things out," I replied, feeling a significant weight lifted off my shoulders. Over the next few days, I began settling into a new routine, organizing my new space at my mom's house and planning my next steps. It was a fresh start, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about the future. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it head-on. I had reclaimed my life, and there was no turning back. After the divorce, Theodore and I sold our house and split the proceeds. I decided it was time to find my own space. One afternoon, while sitting in the kitchen with my mom, I scrolled through apartment listings on my laptop. "Mom, I think I found a place that looks perfect. It's a small apartment downtown, close to work," I said, showing her the pictures. She leaned over my shoulder and smiled. "That looks nice, Chloe. Have you called the realtor yet?" "Not yet," I replied, ready to take the next step in building my new life. "All right, I'm doing this now," I said to myself, a flutter of excitement in my stomach. I picked up my phone, dialed the number, and waited eagerly for the realtor to answer. After a few rings, a warm voice greeted me. "Hello, this is Ethan. How may I assist you today?" "Hi, Ethan. My name is Chloe. I saw your listing for the downtown apartment. Is it still available?" I asked, my fingers crossed under the table. "Yes, it's still on the market. Would you like to come see it?" Ethan's voice carried a hint of hope. "That would be perfect. How about tomorrow afternoon?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "That works for me." "Let's meet at 4 p.m., Ethan confirmed. We ended the call, and the next day I was downtown, ready to meet Ethan and see the apartment. He was standing outside the building, his smile welcoming. "Hi, Chloe. Great to meet you. Let's take a tour," he said, offering a handshake. The apartment was charming, compact yet inviting, with a neat kitchen, a generous living room, and a small balcony that offered a pretty view of the city skyline. "This place is ideal, Ethan." "I'll take it," I declared, a wave of relief washing over me. After signing the lease and collecting the keys, I began planning my move. The next few days were a whirlwind of packing at my mom's house and coordinating with movers for the heavy lifting. On a moving day, my mom and a few friends were there to help. As we loaded the last box into the truck, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves about starting anew. "Chloe, this is a wonderful new beginning for you," my mom said, giving me a comforting hug. "Thanks, Mom. I'm looking forward to making this place my own, I replied with a smile. We drove to my new apartment and, with everyone's help, had everything unpacked and arranged quickly. As I looked around my new home, I felt proud and content. It was the start of something new and I was ready. That evening, to celebrate, I invited my mom and friends over for dinner. We sat on the floor amid boxes, eating pizza and laughing. To Chloe and her new adventure, my friend Victoria toasted, lifting her soda. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate all the support, I said, grateful for their help. As the night progressed, we shared stories and laughed, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely happy. Later, sitting on my balcony and looking out at the city lights, I reflected on my journey and how far I'd come. I was proud of myself for taking the reins of my life. I had heard through friends that Theodore, my former boyfriend, had bought a small apartment with his share of our mutual funds. He was now living there with Audrey and her 3 kids, working 3 jobs to keep up with expenses while they struggled with constant disagreements. One day, unexpectedly, Theodore called. Seeing his name flash on my phone screen surprised me, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello, Theodore. What's up? I asked, my tone neutral. Chloe, please, just hear me out, he began, his voice desperate. I know I messed up, and I'm so sorry for everything. As I listened, I realized how much I had grown and how different my life was now, filled with new beginnings and positive steps forward. I hadn't grasped the extent of your struggles until now. Observing Audrey's kids, I couldn't help but chuckle slightly. Really, Theodore? It's taken you this long to realize? I asked incredulously. I know it's late, but I'm sincere. I've spent a lot of time reflecting, and I miss you. I miss us. Can we start fresh? I'm willing to move into your place and set things right, he explained, his voice filled with earnestness. I laughed, shaking my head in disbelief. Theodore, you can't be serious. You think you can just stroll back into my life as if nothing ever happened? Chloe, I mean it. I'll do anything it takes, even pick up extra work to make amends, he continued, desperation creeping into his tone. Theodore, I've moved on. I'm content now, and I'm not looking to revisit that turmoil, I responded firmly. Come on, Chloe.
We can make it work this time.
I've changed, he persisted. I sighed, feeling both pity and irritation. Theodore, it's over. You need to focus on your own life and your family. I'm not interested in returning to that chaos. Chloe, please, I'm begging you, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Theodore, no. I've found peace without you, and I'm not sacrificing that, I asserted, standing my ground. Take care, Theodore. I hope you find your path. Hanging up the phone, I felt a mix of relief and finality. It was evident Theodore was struggling, but I couldn't let his issues pull me back into a situation I had diligently extricated myself from. Later that day, I met Victoria for coffee and shared the news. You won't believe who called me today, I said, rolling my eyes.
Who?
Victoria inquired, arching an eyebrow. Theodore. He begged me to take him back and let him move into my apartment, I recounted, shaking my head. Victoria burst out laughing, nearly choking on her coffee. Are you serious? What did you say? I told him no, of course. I'm not going back to that mess, I replied, smiling. We spent the afternoon chatting and laughing, and I was struck by how much I had progressed. I had crafted a new life for myself, one of peace and satisfaction. I was determined not to let anyone disrupt it. As I walked home, a profound sense of contentment and closure washed over me. I had finally turned the page on that chapter of my life, ready to advance with confidence and happiness.